Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live, or if you are watching this, listening to this back a bit later, then perhaps welcome to In Deep Sleep. I don't know what I'm going to do with this one over on In Deep Sleep. You will be experiencing it right now, but I'm probably going to do it with a nice background of some rain against a window or something like that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I've got another channel where these get repeated, these live streams get repeated, but just the audio, and with the intention of trying to create a nice soothing atmosphere where everyone can go to sleep. So if that interests you, there is a link down in the description. But today we are going to be looking at Robb Stark's will, which is sort of carrying on with our series of mysteries in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. Not because it itself is a mystery. He did indeed make a will. We know what that is, and we know roughly what it says. The mystery is who knows about it? Where is it? Is it ever going to come out into the open? And what implications will there be if and when it does? So that is the sort of the mystery that we've got. As always, I will answer as many questions as I can. I've got a whole load of questions from my patrons. I've got some questions, obviously, will be coming through in the chat. I'll answer as many of them as I can. But I will start by just sort of framing this for everyone. Robb Stark's will comes into play sort of halfway through the stories that we've got at the moment. We know Robb, after Ned's death, Robb, he's led his army down to the south, and he's gone off on this series of short battles in the Westerlands, trying to tempt the Westerlands army, Tywin Lannister's army, out to the west. That didn't quite succeed for various reasons, but he did win a whole lot of battles. Until the last one at the Crag, where he was injured. And when he was injured, there's a whole other story to this. When he was injured, that is when he met and married Jane Westerling. Now, we're told that the night of that all happening was the night that he was told the news that Bran and Rickon were both dead, and so he needed comforting, as it were. So that's the context here. He realizes, having married Jane, he realizes that this is it's put a lot of his coalition into a lot of doubt, particularly with the Freys, because he's obviously promised in marriage to one of the Freys. So he charges back, joins up with his army. He sends messengers off to the Freys. He thinks he's got some sort of an understanding there. He's going to have to go up to the twins, and he's going to have to grovel. And Edmure Tully is going to marry one of the Freys instead. It's all going to be very awkward, but he's going to somehow get through this. But also he realizes that this is the end of his war in the south, for a few different reasons. Firstly, because he hasn't succeeded in his objective of getting the army, the Lannisters' army, off to the west. They are now a whole lot more secure down in the south following the Battle of the Blackwater. And his grasp on power there within his own coalition is a whole lot weaker. The Freys had headed off back to the twins, so he is a lot weaker than he was before. And most importantly, surprising everyone, Winterfell has fallen, and a lot of the north has fallen. Moat Cailin has fallen. Deepwood Motte has fallen. A lot of key places in the north have fallen to the Iron Islanders. So he has to head back up north. He can't just ignore the fact that his own kingdom, his own castle, has been taken. So he has to head back up north. So the cunning plan is he's going to gather all his forces together at the twins. He's going to play nice with Walder Frey. Everyone's going to marry everyone that they need to marry. He'll gather his army together and he'll head up north. And he's got a sort of a plan about what to do that he comes up with while he's waiting. His last stop off before going to the twins is at Oldstones, and he sort of plans with his senior management team how he's going to take the north. But he also realizes, pragmatically speaking, that he does need a will. And this isn't something that he's had to worry about particularly before, because the line of succession for the North, he's a king now. The line of succession was actually pretty clear. Yeah, he didn't have any children, but if he died, then Bran would take over. If Bran died, then Rickon would take over. There wasn't such an issue there for him. But now Bran and Rickon, he thinks, are both dead. And he hasn't, although he's now married, he hasn't yet got any children. And he has left his wife down in River Run. So, as far as he can tell, there's no chance of him having any children in the very near future, at least. And he's off to fight a few more battles. And in the last battle, he got injured quite badly. And he's perhaps feeling a little bit of his mortality. So, he does need to clarify the line of succession. So, he talks to his mother, as every good boy should. He talks to his mother, but it's very clear that he's already made up his mind. And she agrees with him that, yes, he does need a will. And this will say, if I do not have any children and I die, this is who's going to take over as king. And it can't be Bran, can't be Rickon. They talk a bit about Sansa. Decide that it can't be Sansa. Sansa, at this moment in time, she's married to Tyrion, and the very clear plan there is that the Lannisters would put her as the Lady of Winterfell, and then her children would inherit, but her children would be Tyrion's children and would therefore be Lannisters, and they would grow up, and the North would fall to the Lannisters that way. She was now, by marriage, a Lannister. So Robb didn't want Sansa to be next in line. And Kat kind of reluctantly agrees with this. She does kind of understand and accept that. But then she says, what about Arya? Arya, therefore, is next in line. And Robb says she's been gone for a year or so now. She's disappeared. No one's seen her. She's almost certainly dead. And Kat says, well, you can't know that. She must still be. I feel she's still alive. And Robb's like, no, I can't leave her as my heir. I think she's dead. And he then puts this to her, that actually there is one other person who grew up, one of Ned Stark's children, who could inherit. She realizes this is about Jon, and obviously she does not like Jon. Obviously she objects. But Robb is like, no, this man grew up as my brother. I trust him. And she starts scrabbling around thinking, well, who else could there be? And she starts thinking about these distant cousins. And Robb stands firm. It's like, no, I trust Jon. He is more Stark than these people who've never even seen the North. He trusts me. Kat kind of plays this role and says, yeah, okay, you two may get on, but what about his children and your children? If you have them in the future, if you're going to legitimize him, which is a thing that has to happen first because he's illegitimate, if you're going to legitimize him, then that means that he has a claim no matter what, because the wording of this will wouldn't just be, if I die, then Jon gets legitimized and he becomes king. The implication is that the wording is, Jon is legitimized and is now my heir until I have a king. Until I have a son. So that's the situation. And Kat says, but your children and his children might not get on. And she gives some examples from history when this has happened in the past. And she sort of has a point about that, at least. But Robb's firm on this. And he basically says, look, I'm the king and I'm going to do what I want. And so he gathers his team together. They come up with a few plans. They hear news that Balon Greyjoy is dead, which they take as a broadly positive sign, because Balon was clearly the person who commissioned these attacks on the North. So there might now be a change of policy. There might be a Kingsmoot. Everybody might head home. Who knows? So they do have to head north. And before he sends everybody off on various missions that he's got for them, he says, okay, everyone, here's my will. I want you to all witness it. So he gets these 6-7 different lords to all witness this will that he's written. Now, the point we have to make is that we do not actually see this will. The very, very clear implication is that John is named. John is legitimized and named as his heir until he has children of his own. But we haven't seen that actually written down. And we also, crucially, haven't seen the writing, the exact wording that is used, which may or may not turn out to be important the deeper into the story we get. I had a long time ago, I think you can find it if you go back, I think even on this channel, I did an interview with the Westerosi Bar Association, a couple of lawyers who podcast about Song of Ice and Fire stuff, and this is one of the issues I talked through them with, and it becomes very clear the more you start to think about the legal issues related to this, the more convoluted this might get. Is the wording of this, because I have no, because Bran and Rickon are both dead, I therefore name John as my heir? If so, when it's discovered that Bran and Rickon are not dead, does that invalidate the will? If it doesn't say that, does that mean that if they come back, they're then cut out of the line of succession, or might they be able to come back into it? Does it name John heir as Jon Snow, as he is the son of Ned Stark, he is the heir? What would happen if we find out later that he's not the son of Ned Stark? Does that invalidate it? So there's a whole load of other things that we simply do not know. And I think that the 2 points here that we have to kind of make is that, first of all, yes, there are lots of elements to this, the techie details we do not know and do not understand. But secondly, this will be used by various people. But it is like everything else in the rules of succession, the laws of inheritance in Westeros. Ultimately, the winner gets to decide these things. Robert Baratheon took the Iron Throne by force. They came up with some justification about him technically being sort of connected to the Lannisters, to the Targaryens, but everybody knew that that wasn't really the reason why he was the new king. The reason he was the new king was because he took the Iron Throne by force. Similarly, that is going to be the situation in the North. If a person becomes acclaimed as king, probably the will itself will be kind of quietly swept under the table, or some clever people will find a way to justify, to wheedle the words around to suit exactly what they want. So the will itself is not, and this is kind of the starting point I suggest for all we're going to be talking about today, is not so much a matter of what does it say as a how will it be used, and what are the implications of this. And the main point I think I would make on this is that Robb did this. He had to do this. It was the right thing to do this. But the reason he did it is to add clarity to the line of succession. In reality, it is probably going to do the exact opposite. In reality, it is probably going to add in a claimant who previously hadn't been there in John, and people will then start piling in behind these different candidates. Some of them wishing to use the will, some of them wishing to say that the will is invalid, and all of this will just confuse the line of succession. Okay, so that's the and I should just say, where is this now? We'll come into the detail of this, but the point of having witnesses is that these people will know what this says. And so it's not just a piece of paper who holds this piece of paper. The important point is, where are these witnesses? Because they are the people who know about it. And at a very high level, one at least of them is very probably dead, or two, depending on your perspective. We've got two of them who are imprisoned, and another couple who are We don't know yet, but probably in the neck. So they have the news of this has not yet reached the wider world. This is a secret which will be unleashed at some point in the Winds of Winter. Okay, let's have a quick flick through the chat. Let's have a look. So, question, Carl. Agree Weirwood saying, if Robb's will says that John is released from his vows, will that hold up once the will is found? Yes, I mean, I think the point is that Robb's ability to release John from his vows and legitimize him comes from the fact that he is king. So again, another kind of nuance of this is if you dispute the fact that he is a king, then you might say that therefore does not have the authority to release John from his vows, because John has he has disavowed all claims, and it takes a king. This is Stannis claims that he can do this. Stannis a couple of times offers to legitimize John, free him from his Night's Watch vows and make him the Lord of Winterfell. That's part of what his plan is. Obviously not the making John a king part, but sort of freeing him from his Night's Watch vows. And nobody really doubts that this is a thing which can happen as long as you recognize the authority of the king. If you only recognize Robb as a lord, then he does not have the authority to do that. Otherwise, any lord could just go and release people from the wall. This is the king's prerogative. Yeah, Noah Holland asking, can a king release him from his vows? Again, we haven't got the full set of laws about the wall and the Night's Watch, but the clear implication is that from the way that Stannis acts is that he believes that he has the authority to do that because he's the king of the Seven Kingdoms. And so if you are the king, then that presumably gives you the right to do that. It's not it's probably worth saying then at the wall, from our understanding, is that they have a largely unwritten constitution rather than a codified constitution. They don't have a big piece of paper where they go and refer to it every now and then. Oh yes, in clause 5, subsection 3, it says that the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms may release somebody. It's not like that, but there are some clear precedents and some clear understandings about the role of everybody within that kind of ecosystem. Okay, let's go to question. Well, just very quickly, Ordinary You saying, hi Robert, Dan, mods and Game of Thrones fam, so glad to catch a live. Ooh, Robert, I subscribed to your In Deep Sleep, so wonderful. Please loop your analysis throughout. I love it. Well, this is so I will just say this on In Deep Sleep. The plan is, if you're listening to this on In Deep Sleep, hopefully this is before you got too sleepy, but the plan is for the first few videos I'm going to try a few different things. I've heard a few people say that they'd prefer what I did on the first video was I did me talking here for 2-3 hours or whatever it was, and then I kind of just left. I had a roaring fire going and I just left that sound going for the next few hours. The next one I sort of just cut it short just after the live stream itself, so the audio finished and then it ended. I will try the rain going, but also some people have said that they would, rather than having the sort of either the silence or the ongoing noise, they just prefer to have the audio on loop. I will try that. I will see what people like. So it may well be that what we end up with is a number of different playlists where here's all the playlists with rain, here's the playlists with fireside, here's the playlist with it goes to silence, here's the ones where it's on loop, whatever. So that's the plan. We'll try a few different things, and it may be that it's very clear what people like, and it may be that different people want different things, in which case I will just create a bank of these. I obviously do these every week. I might try a few other different things as well, but in next to no time we'll have this bank of things up there on In Deep Sleep in different ways. Right, let's go to question from Catherine first. It's saying, Versith, saying, "Hi, Robert. We know that Robb legitimized John in his will and named him heir. What do you think his reasonings were, apart from what he told Cat? They grew up together, had a close bond, and Robb probably trusted John, but they were still young when they separated, and life in Winterfell hadn't exactly given John much opportunity to show any leadership potential. Do you think it's as simple as he's my only remaining brother, so he's the next in line Stark? What do you think Robb thought about John as the next Stark leader?" Well, it's an interesting question. What I will do um, is quickly read out the, um, the brief bit of the conversation between Cat and Robb here, because I think this is quite useful. He's said, "I need to have an heir." And she goes, "You must name another heir until such time as Jane gives you a son." She considered a moment. "Your father's father had no siblings, but his father had a sister who married a younger son of Lord Raymar Royce of the junior branch. They had 3 daughters, all of whom wed Vale lordlings, a Waynwood and a Corbray for certain. The youngest, it might have been a Templeton, but..." And then she sort of trails off, and it's clear that she's struggling at this point. Who is next in line? Technically, I don't know. She doesn't even know their names. John's response is, Robb's response is, "John's more a Stark than some lordling from the Vale who have never so much as set eyes on Winterfell." And that seems to be the main driver. Yes, he trusts him. Yes, he grew up with him like his brother. Yes, he considers him his father's son. But also he considers him a Stark. And he looks around at the other options. Bran and Rickon are gone. Arya, he thinks, is also gone. Sansa, he doesn't want because that brings in the Lannisters. So the options that he sees are John or some other person I've never heard of, who's never been to the North, doesn't keep to the old gods, doesn't understand the Stark ways, doesn't even have the surname Stark, is somebody Templeton or something like that. For him, I think this was quite a straightforward decision. I don't think that huge amounts of detailed umming and ahhing went into this. I also think we have to emphasize that this is a will, but he wasn't thinking he was about to die. We look at this back and go, "Oh, yeah, in a few days' time, he's going to the Red Wedding." This is him saying who's going to take over after him. That's not what his thinking is. His thinking is that he will survive, he will have children of his own. He just, in the meantime, just as a failsafe, just in case, he wants to have somebody there as his heir. So the person who has a problem with it is Cat, and we know why she has a problem with it, because of the whole Jon Snow issues that she has. But the response from others doesn't seem that surprised. We don't hear that any of the other lords who are there, they sort of like kick up a fuss about this. This doesn't seem to be an issue for them so much. Most of them will have known John, and they will have known that he grew up with Robb, and John came out on various kind of little missions and things with the Starks in the olden days. So he will have, if not brought up in leadership, he was brought up to understand the importance of leadership. He was brought up to understand the importance of the traditions. He was brought up to understand that he who gives the sentence should strike the blow. So that's the kind of thing he understands. So I don't think he thought this was a big thing. I don't think most of the others thought this was such a big thing. It's only Cat, really, and we see this through her eyes, and so I think that's where the kind of the slight uncertainty comes from. Let's go to Bear Island, saying, "Hello, Robert. Hope you and Dan are well." We are. Yes, Dan, for those who keep up with my dog, Dan, he did have a bit of an injury a couple of weeks ago, but it is all sorted now. Thank you very much. He's He's had his stitches removed and he is much better. So thank you for all the well wishes on that. If Stannis survives and takes Winterfell, with or without Rickon, he may find himself at odds with Robb's heir being named king. Could that ultimately be his downfall in the books if the North sides with the heir rather than Stannis? And if the will does legitimize Jon, how will the Northern Lords feel about Jon leaving the Night's Watch, even if it's to rule them? I mean, these are interesting questions, and a lot of this is the iteration of different things. We've got a question about that coming up a little bit later. When do these different things happen? Will Stannis find himself at odds with Robb's heir being named king? Well, yes. That much, I think, is pretty clear. He won't be at odds with the idea of Jon being legitimized and being named Lord of Winterfell. That bit he's absolutely fine with. That bit he wanted. So he is okay with that. Would he be at odds with people considering Jon to be a king? Very much so. But my take is that the others will start to focus minds. And we have got two people there who are very focused in on battling the others, in Stannis and Jon. For both of them, this is their overriding concern. They want to deal with Winterfell first. But after that, they want to focus on the others. So my feeling is that Stannis and Jon probably would find a way of putting things to one side in the short term and then focusing on other stuff. They are yes, Stannis can be very clear. Jon is not a king and should not claim to be king, but I could certainly imagine that Jon could sort of allow it to be sort of pushed to one side. I'm not going to claim to be king for the time being. Let's deal with all of this later, kind of thing. I could certainly imagine that. If, of course, Stannis survives, which is another matter entirely. How will the Northern Lords feel about Jon leaving the Night's Watch if it's to rule them? Well, I think again the only real context we have immediately is from the witnesses, none of whom seem to have an issue with this that we can tell. Maybe Robb talked to them individually before, maybe we missed a bit of the conversation where this came up. There's lots of maybes here, but nobody's seemingly up in arms about this idea. If they want a Stark, then Jon's as good as they're going to get, and I think that they're not as set on the wall, most of them, as the Starks are. So, for example, of these witnesses, it's not just the Northern Lords. We have to remember he's also the Lord of the Riverlands. So the Tullys don't care huge amounts about the wall. It's like, oh, okay, so he was Lord Commander, now he's not Lord Commander. Fine, this is the one-off that you can deal with that. Similarly, the Mallisters. I mean, that's not so much of an issue. I think, if anything, the idea of having somebody who understands what the wall needs as Lord of Winterfell, as the King of the North, probably would help out the North. So I don't think this is going to be a huge issue. It might be an issue for the people at the wall. As we saw, Jon, he was killed for abandoning his post. And abandoning his oath, basically. So there will be plenty of members of the Night's Watch who will not be happy with this. Some of whom were involved in this plot. It wasn't a huge plot as far as we can tell, but it's this decision to kill Jon. So that is where the real opposition will come from, I suspect, rather than the Lords themselves. Roman Lakovic saying, I really like your ability to give detailed responses to spontaneous questions from the chat. Improv has always been an Achilles heel for me. Keep it up. Well, thank you very much. It's, I mean, prep goes into this. It's not 100% improv, but thank you. I hugely appreciate it. Let's go to a question from James Perkins. Hello again, Robert. One of the things we know will eventually happen in the story but that will eventually happen in the story, that as yet to happen, is that Bran will be the one to ultimately sit on the Iron Throne. In the show, they kind of glossed over Bran's claims to the North by having him kind of just shut it down with the whole "I can't be Lord of anything" bit, only to reverse himself with his ascent to the Iron Throne. Given this is not necessarily the case in the books, how do you think Bran will interface with Robb's will and the brewing northern succession crisis before eventually becoming king over all 7 probably kingdoms? So how will Bran interact with this? So we'll look at this from the perspective of various of the Stark children, potential heirs. And they will probably all arrive at slightly different points in this narrative, and they will probably all have slightly different people championing their cause. My instinct is that the conflict, the succession crisis, such as it will not so much be between the siblings as the people who support the siblings. So it's not that we will have Rickon and John and Bran all fighting it out to be who's going to be king. I'll be king. No, you can't be king. That I don't think is going to happen. But there will be people who will throw in their lot behind each of these different candidates, and those are the people who will start coming into conflict. So, Bran is the obvious person for a Stark loyalist to throw their weight behind, because Bran was the heir. Nobody disputes this. If Bran had not died, he didn't die, but if he'd not been thought to die, there would have been no doubt about this at all. He would, when Robb died, Bran would be the new king. That's the straightforward point. So for some people, this is quite a straightforward discussion. That Robb died, he didn't have any children, so the succession should go to whoever's next, which is Bran. We thought for a time he wasn't alive, but it turns out he is. So he's the obvious candidate. I think so. Yeah, you're right. On the TV show, then he goes very much down this. Oh, I can't. I'm not. I can't be Lord of Anywhere. Look at me. I don't think I think that's an oversimplification of what's going to happen in the books, but I think that he will very much take this position that he does not want to be king in the North because he's got a different role. And whether he spells this out or not, but he is taking on this three-eyed crow kind of role, responsibility. He is the one that can see what is going on. He is the one who's going to be trying to guide and influence what is happening. And he will not want to be caught up in the day-to-day business of actually ruling. We see him, incidentally, for a little while. When Robb goes south, he does rule, sort of, in Robb's stead. He's there with Maester Luwin, and people file in and make their complaints or their petitions. We need a little bit of extra help for winter time. This person over there stole some of my sheep. Whatever it is, the things that you bring to your lord. He was a young boy at the time, but he clearly didn't find that particularly interesting or engaging. He doesn't want to do that. He wanted to climb, he wanted to fly, he wanted to ride. He couldn't do those things. He was very frustrated, but he also wasn't that engaged in doing the ruling business. Is that foreshadowing? Who knows? But I think he will see that he has got a role in this fight against the others, which is not him being the king. So I think for him, it's not going to be such a big deal. Sort of moving on to the second half of your question is, how do you then get from that to being king at the end, which is one of the 3 WTF moments that the showrunners said that they'd got from that handover meeting they had with George R. R. Martin. These 3 moments that were like, whoa, didn't see that one coming. One of which is Shireen, one of which is Hold the Door, one of which was Bran ending up being king. Now, so how do we get there in the books? The first caveat we do have to say is that discussion that they had was a decade ago. George R. Martin has been writing a lot since then. It's possible he's changed his mind. We shouldn't, I think, anymore. For a long time, we held, and I think probably all three of those things are still going to be the case. But I think for a long time we held them up as definitely happening. Now, because he is this Gardner writer, because he has given us hints, he's shifting things around, changing things a little bit, that we shouldn't necessarily take those three things as written in stone. So that's the first caveat. But if we are to take this as how he gets there, we I think have to accept the fact that George R. R. Martin has said quite clearly, I think, in building up the narrative around Bran, is that he said actually Bran was the first character he thought of in this. This came out of thinking about Bran. The first scene, many of us know, the first scene he imagined was that one with the direwolf pups. But then the focusing of that scene was Bran. And then he realized he couldn't just have Bran. He wanted Bran to be, if there's direwolf pups, he wanted lots of people to have these pups in this family. So Bran had to have brothers and sisters. And so it kind of expanded out from there. So Bran is the starting point here. Now, the extent to which we take that as being the end point of George R. R. Martin's thinking, I think it's up to everybody individually to decide that, but I think we do have to hold that in mind. As for how we get from him not wanting to rule the North to ending up ruling the Seven Kingdoms, I think I'm always hesitant to say what they did on the TV show was this, therefore. But they had this kind of like really stripped down Great Council at the end, if you remember. They had basically the representative of all the lords of the land sort of sat there in this semicircle, and they between them decided who should rule. And something in that did kind of ring true for me, which is that you looked at that circle at the time. I can remember looking at it. I can't remember how many there were there. I don't know, maybe 12 or 13 different faces. But of them, 3 or 4 were Starks. Another couple were best friends of Starks, or he'd worked with the Starks before. One of them had been sworn to a Stark in the past. Another one was an uncle to the Starks. It was like, this is very Stark heavy. Because the Starks won, there's lots of ways of putting this, but put it starkly, so to speak, the noble family which will probably emerge from all of this with the most members and with the greatest ongoing strength is likely to be the Starks. And so it's then a matter of who do they want in control. I think after everything that happened, they won't want any connections with the Targaryens. I think the Lannisters will be gone. I don't think anyone's here suggesting that Tyrion, if he survives, is going to end up on the Iron Throne. Similarly, I don't think anyone's going to be pushing for the Tullys to be on there. The Arryns are largely going to be going. Nobody's going to be wanting the Greyjoys to be on there. The list starts to get quite thin quite quickly. So who's left? It's the Starks. And if Jon, as seems likely, does not want it, if Arya, as seems likely, does not want it, if Sansa, as seems likely, is wanting to stay up in Winterfell because of that's where her character arc is taking it all the way back up to Winterfell, who's left? It's Bran. So it may well be that it feels quite an easy progression to get in there once we've reached that point of the story. Not because this is a natural thing or who has got the greatest story. Bran has got the greatest story. None of that. It's simply a matter of practicality. Who is left who has got ruling experience, is from one of the great families, and is from one of the great families that conceivably we wouldn't mind actually ruling us. And the shortlist is quite short. Gilio saying, how will John's death and resurrection impact his claim? A bastard zombie raised from the dead by a foreign witch might be a hard sell, will or not. Yes, I mean, and this is an entirely valid point, and you have made it quite well. I will just very briefly, before I answer this one, just say this. This is a question as channel member. If you're a channel member here, then you get your you get every now and then you can get questions highlighted and things like that. So I do want to thank channel members. If you wish to support this channel, thank you so much. The best way to do that is via Patreon, which is why I answer so many questions from my patrons. But if for whatever reason you do not wish to go over to Patreon, there is a link to Patreon somewhere. But if for whatever reason you don't want to, there's also a link somewhere to be a channel member. So thank you for if you're a patron or a channel member, I hugely appreciate it. And while I'm doing thanks, the moderators are here and are wonderful. If you are here live watching this, if you're in the chat, could you just show a little bit of love for the moderators, because they are amazing. But to answer this question, how will John's death and resurrection impact his claim? A bastard zombie raised from the dead by a foreign witch might be a hard sell, will or not? Yes, it could indeed be a hard sell. But the question is, how many people will know? Because this happens at the wall. And then a kind of a supplementary question is, what will this do to the people who are potentially his supporters? Will this make them against him or for him? So my take is that, and I did a video on this a little while ago, I think the circumstances of how this will happen may well convince a number of the supporters of the law that John is Azor Ahai born again. So if that's the case, then actually he may get a whole load of extra support for it. I don't think John is going to be actively seeking being king, and yet he will have a group of people behind him who want him to be king, the prince that was promised, as it were. Which, just as an incidental, if he is legitimized, and if he then becomes a Stark, and if somebody else becomes the king of the North, he is a prince, and he is the prince that was promised, if you like, in as much as he is Azor Ahai reborn. People will be willing to manipulate these things in a number of different ways. I'm not saying that's a good interpretation of those prophecies. I'm just saying that that might well be a way that a number of characters in this go. But yes, there will definitely be some people who are uncertain about that. But then at the same time, you've seen Lady Stoneheart, who clearly something very similar has happened to, and people have rallied around behind her. So the rank and file of normal Westerosis, their responses will differ hugely. Okay, let's go to Cannibal the Dragon asking if the wildlings will be in on the council. If you're talking about the Great Council to choose the High King at the very end, probably not, but then maybe they will. I don't think this will be a massively formal thing that previously it's like, here's the list of invitees. I suspect if you're wanting to be involved, then you will be involved. Some of the wildlings will, a lot of them will be south of the wall and will probably feel that they have as much of a right to have a say as anyone else. And I don't think anyone's going to stop them. Kaz Ballerina. Actually, you just I answered the I just answered the question before you put that on the super chat. But thank you very much. I do love it when people do that, dropping things in super chats. It's just a lot easier for me to see. And Commander Ray saying just some appreciation and love for the mods and great streams. King in the North. Thank you so much. Let's go to Lady Pushkins. Hi, Robert and Dan. John is sometimes torn between duty, honour, and his heart. How do you think Robb's wishes will affect this? Will he choose his duty to the wall or his duty to Robb's wishes and become Lord of Winterfell or something else? And do you think Robb ultimately went with his heart? Well, so in terms of Robb, first of all, is this a decision of the heart for him? Was this decision of the head? Was this a matter of duty? I think it's all of them. I don't think that there's a conflict here for him. I think that he feels that his duty is to name an heir. I think he feels for the family and as a matter of duty that his heir should be someone who is a Stark, not somebody who doesn't understand the Stark ways. I think that there is love and affection there for John. I think he grew up treating him like a brother, and so he doesn't see this as such a big thing for him to be legitimized. I think there is a love thing there, but I don't think that this in any way is kind of divorced from what Robb sees his duty. So I think as far as that bit's concerned, I think that's relatively straightforward. In terms of what will John do? Will he become Lord of Winterfell in line with Robb's wishes? So this is an interesting one because John was offered to be Lord of Winterfell by Stannis a couple of times. So we do, and we see this from his POV. So we do kind of get his perspective on this. And it's very clear that as much as he kind of denies it to himself, he always did yearn for this. He yearned to be a proper Stark. He yearned, or secretly, he thought he could be the Lord. So there is a part of him that actually wants that. And I suspect that Robb may have been insightful enough to realize that this wasn't him going against what John wanted. There's no thought that Robb's saying John doesn't want this. He just kind of assumes that if he legitimizes John, then John will go along with it. There's not a thought that we can see of him going, well, he might refuse, he might not want it, he might think that he should stay as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. That's not something that's on his radar. And the reason why, there are a few reasons, but one of the reasons that he ultimately decides or uses to decide not to accept it is that Melisandre kind of unhelpfully pipes up during these negotiations and says, yeah, there's only one condition from me. If you accept and become Lord of Winterfell, then we'll need to burn down the Winterfell weirwood tree. And John thinks, I can't do that because Winterfell does not belong to me. It belongs to the Starks. It doesn't even really belong to the Starks, he says. He thinks it belongs to the weirwood tree, which is an incredibly insightful train of logic. But is this going to be changed, therefore, by Robb legitimizing him and making him Lord of Winterfell, King of the North? Potentially, yes, because he would no longer feel honor bound to be burning down that tree because he's not accepting it. It's not a condition put in by Melisandre. He's already got this. He doesn't have to do what she says, and so he could rule it as a Stark. So I think this does kind of shift things a little bit. Added to which, we do have to accept the fact that he had, in the short term, decided that he was going to abandon his post at the wall and he was going to go down and sort out Winterfell. I think the implication was that once he'd sorted out Winterfell, he was going to come back up to the wall and carry on being Lord Commander. At least that's what he thought he would do. So this doesn't change the immediate line of action at all, really, as far as I'm concerned, is that if he's brought back and then he's told, oh, you've been legitimized, you're now King of the North, you're now Lord of Winterfell, he'll go, okay, where was I? Oh, yes, I was heading down to Winterfell. So he will just carry on and go and do that. The question is what he does after that, because he will probably still want to go back up to the wall because he's now completely bought into protecting the world against the others, and that will mean him going up to the wall. I think that he will find, though, increasingly, when this is kind of like the story of Jon, is that although he doesn't seek leadership positions, they are sort of thrust upon him and people follow him. He's a natural leader in a way that lots of people probably wish they were. He did not put his name forward to be Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. It was put forward for him, and he won the vote. He didn't necessarily want to do that, but he took it on anyway. He here did actively refused when the offer was given to him to be legitimized and be made Lord of Winterfell. But then it appears that's going to happen to him anyway, regardless of what he says. He's just going to be told. And this is the difference: is that if you accept Robb's place as King of the North, you have to accept that his word, that's been done, is that Jon, you're now legitimized, Jon, and you're free from your Night's Watch vows, and you're now Lord of Winterfell. That's just a thing that's happened. So again, he will probably find that this is kind of thrust on him. Similarly, the wildlings are starting to follow him. Not all of them, but a lot of them are starting to follow him because they kind of recognize his leadership role. So what we're going to get is probably somebody who's not wanting any of these titles that are put on him, and more titles will start being thrust on him at various different times. As I say, I suspect Melisandre may start calling him Azor Ahai Reborn. I suspect that at some point we're going to get the reveal and people are going to start calling him a Targaryen, the heir to the Seven Kingdoms. We're going to get somebody who's going to start saying, you're the prince that was promised. All of these titles are going to be thrown at him, and he's not wanting any, he's not claiming any of them, but he will just carry on. So that's my general take, is that the way that people out there will think is that we're giving him these extra titles, this responsibility, he therefore has to do it. I think he's doing the thing that he wants to do, and people are putting the titles of responsibilities onto him that he's naturally accruing anyway. Shira Blackwood has gifted 5 IDG live memberships. Thank you very much. This is a thing you can do when you've been a member for a little while, gift free memberships to a few people. So thank you very much. A quick flick through. Peredo Gladioli saying some are born to greatness, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Yes, I think that's actually true. I think the perhaps ironic might not be the right word. Thing about Jon is that he's probably all three. He was born to greatness because he was born the son of Rhaegar. He will achieve greatness because he will do great things. He's already done some pretty great things. And also he will have greatness thrust upon him. People will make him Lord Commander of this, King of that, whatever. So I think he's going to end up being all of those things. Right, let's go to Oh, actually, just another quick thing on that. Andrew Kay saying, Book John is more latently ambitious than super reluctant. Show John he agonizes over Stannis' offer, even had decapitating Robb dreams. Yeah, so this is a valid point. That it's latent within him. Is that he is a thing that he struggles with, this desire. He has to recognize he has this desire within him. So it's not the simple. I mean, as always, the TV show, it kind of like simplifies these things and it just kind of boils it down to I don't want it. It's like that's not really where he's at. It's not just that he's there going through life and not wanting responsibility. He struggles with this because part of him does, but the wanting responsibility thing. So he goes to the wall and he thinks to himself about, yeah, I could be a ranger. Actually, maybe I could be first ranger. And so his brain does always go ahead to these things that he thinks that he could achieve. It's not that he's lacking in ambition. It's just that he's he's not the one who's always doing the pushing. The pushing happens when people are pushing things on to him. Um, let's go to Orion's Orcas saying, I think Robb will have named John heir, but will he be alive to claim Winterfell? If not, does this mean it's Rickon's moment to return with Davos? Okay, so yeah, timing here is going to be everything. George R. R. Martin will play with this timing. He will work out what order these things have to come in order to make what he considers to be the best story. But yes, there certainly is going. There will be some degree of irony if the will terms arrive at the wall at around the time that John is dead, because then it's like, oh, what are we going to do now? And then he comes back and it's like, did that invalidate this or not? Because he was definitely dead and now he's definitely not dead. Does this mean that again, what's the wording of the will going to be? As long as John lives, then he is my heir. Is that right? It could get quite techie quite quickly. But in terms of Rickon, is it going to be Rickon's moment to return with Davos? So I think Rickon will probably be the first, or it may be John, but we'll have to wait and see, the first of the Starks to be returning to Winterfell. If you've kind of lost track of where Rickon is, that's absolutely fine. He went off when Bran and co were heading north. They basically had this bit of a conflict and decided that the safest thing to do was to split up the two Stark heirs. Bran was definitely heading north. Rickon was going to go with Osha and Shaggy Dog somewhere else. And they didn't want to sort of tell each other where they were going so that they couldn't give each other away. But they head off, and we don't hear about them in the story for a very long time. We do get one glimpse. John has this kind of weird dream where he sort of sees through Ghost's eyes, and Ghost is connected to Shaggy Dog, and so we see through Shaggy Dog's eyes, and we see a giant one-horned goat, a horny goat, as we often would enjoy saying, which very much suggests that they're on the island of Skagos. This is confirmed by the information that Lord Manderley has managed to gather from Wex, who's a whole other story. But Wex has witnessed this, and he's seen which direction they went and decided, okay, so they're going off to, and they followed them, they've gone off towards Skagos. And so Lord Manderley has sent Davos, who is there on a mission from Stannis. He's sent him off and said, okay, well, we'll support Stannis if you go off and get Rickon for us. Now, the exact timings of those things, it's always a little bit hard to work out exactly, because although the order of the chapters in A Song of Ice and Fire is roughly chronological, they're not exactly chronological. And in particular, when we get to the last two books, obviously two books happening roughly simultaneously. So it's a little bit hard sometimes to see exactly where the different what time the different things happen. But it does seem as if that moment with Davos being sent off, that happened quite a little while before the main the bit of the story that we're at the moment, if only because Lord Manderley is in White Harbour and he's got to make his way all the way over to Winterfell, which means that Davos must have had time to be heading up to Skagos and then perhaps returning after that. So if he is successful, and I think the working assumption is that probably he will return with Rickon. And the question is, who therefore is going to be falling in behind Rickon? Because if Stannis survives the battle or battles that are ahead of him, he will think that he has won the support of the Manderleys. But the Manderleys will have brought a Stark in. And all of these Northerners will be loyal to the Starks. And so immediately we've then got a bit of an issue there between those two. Because in the absence of anything else, if Robb's will has not yet appeared, Rickon is probably going to be considered the heir, or presumptive heir, unless Bran also turns up. But most of us, I think, are still under this assumption that Rickon is not long for this world, partly because of the name of his direwolf. It's one of the oldest working theories, and it is a working theory which is working, is that the fate of each of the Starks is shown by the name of their direwolf. So, for example, Ghost for Jon, he will die and come back like a ghost does, or lingers like a ghost does. Or you have Lady for Sansa, and she will end up being Lady of Winterfell, and so on. That kind of idea. Shaggy Dog. What does Shaggy Dog mean? A Shaggy Dog story, obviously a kind of a long and convoluted story that ultimately doesn't really lead to anywhere. So a lot of people have kind of interpreted that as meaning Rickon's story might be interesting and it will go through quite a lot of twists and turns, but it's not ultimately going to impact hugely on the plot. The kind of other side of that is that George R. Martin did apparently have to, in the very beginning of Game of Thrones, when he had a voice, he did have to push for the inclusion of Rickon, on the grounds that he thought Rickon would be important. He told them that Rickon would be important later on, so they had to include him. The team at the time were thinking, how do we... Nobody knew about Game of Thrones at that time, and here we've got this massive family. Can we get rid of a couple of characters? Rickon's very young. He doesn't seem to be doing much. George R. Martin was very strong. No, he has to be there. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that his role has to be one of the big central things. It's just that he has got an important role. If I had to guess, probably he is going to be killed by Ramsay. Ramsay, because the Boltons, if they get a whiff of there being any Starks around, they will try and take them out straight away, because they know that they can control the North to a degree only as long as the North do not have somebody to rally around. If a Stark appears, then the North will start rallying around the Starks. So they will want to get rid of him. Ramsay, his hounds in the show we've been told, have been bred to hunt both humans and wolves. And that sounds very foreshadowy to me. So if I had to guess at the moment, it's not going to be like shooting him, zigzag Rickon. It's not going to be like that. I think it will be brutal. And I think that this will be Ramsay killing Rickon and Shaggy Dog. let's go to Sir Friend. Happy Thursday, Robert. Do you see much actual drama or tension between the Stark children, either around the succession from Robb's will or otherwise? The show tried to play up some tension between Jon and Sansa and Arya and Sansa. Whilst it might be realistic for some disagreement, I really hope after all they've been through, the kids come together and really become the pack. Best wishes, warmest regards. Well, best wishes and warmest regards to you too. Um, yeah, I think obviously the show played up a few things because that made for good drama. My general take in terms of the succession is that the actual tension will be from the people pushing the different cases. Now, with Sansa, the person pushing her claim is going to be Littlefinger, and Littlefinger will. We know what he's like. He will be trying to sow seeds of doubt in other people's minds, trying to win people around to his side. And so, if that is happening, and I certainly see a situation where George R. R. Martin gives us this kind of weird mirror of Ned Stark down in King's Landing. When Ned Stark was down in King's Landing, he was like a fish out of water. He did not know how to play the game in King's Landing because he just simply did not understand the people and the way these things worked. He just wanted to be very straight and honest and do the right thing. And that led to his death at the hands of Littlefinger. When we get Littlefinger in Winterfell, he's going to be the fish out of water. He's going to be the one that he's going to be doing his normal thing, and it's not going to work because the people around him, that just doesn't work on them like that. And I think that will lead to his death, because I think that he will. It's not going to be the same way it happened on the show, but he will try to, if his plan is to get Sansa onto the throne, he will have to try and eliminate the other Starks somehow, and that probably means turning the Starks against each other. And probably what we're going to have is Sansa having a moment where she breaks free from doing what he wants to do, because she's now finally in her safe place. She is back in Winterfell. Where she is in the books at the moment, she's still doing the Littlefinger thing. But now she will understand him. By the time we've moved on a book, she will understand him. She'll know what he's about, but she's not got that constant fear behind her. She is now back amongst her people. And so I think this is going to be quite a big moment for Sansa. Will there be some dispute between Sansa and Jon, or Sansa and Arya? Well, about who rules in Winterfell, not, I don't think huge amounts. As I say, I don't think Arya wants to rule in Winterfell. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think Jon will be put there by people, and Sansa might be a bit aggrieved, but that's more going to come from Littlefinger. It's probably worth pointing out that a lot of people will need to be convinced about Sansa, because she did marry a Lannister, and she has been gone for a very long time. And she did write, she was forced to write by Cersei, or she was manipulated to write by Cersei, letters which basically said to Robb, you should give up, you should acknowledge Joffrey as your king, father was a traitor, that kind of stuff. And she will have to accept that and acknowledge it. And that could cause some issues, not necessarily just with her siblings, but also with some of the Northern Lords, who will see her as a kind of a betrayer of sorts. And this, I think, probably is, if anything, going to be the thing which kind of holds her back within this kind of succession crisis, which is that there will be a significant number of people who are still suspicious of her. She may or may not still be married to Tyrion at this point. Littlefinger is still clearly trying to get her out of that. If he succeeds, he is then probably going to try and marry her to Harry the heir, Harry Swift. So, sorry, Harry Harding, I should say. And if so, then that's a good match, but it is, again, not from the north, and a lot of people will be a little bit suspicious of that as well. This seems to be very much a political marriage. So, will there be tensions? Not huge amounts, mostly by their supporters rather than them. But Sansa, if anyone, will be the one that has the most kind of tensions with others, I think. Let's go to agree. Weirwood saying that Littlefinger may make Sansa a bigamist first. Yeah, will he make her marry before she's got a divorce? I mean, this was when, back in the day when George R. R. Martin did reply to fan questions, there was, I wish I had the quote in front of me. It's on So Spake Martin, if anyone wishes to hunt it out. But he was asked whether it's possible to annul a wedding if the couple had they'd never consummated the marriage. And the clear thing is, I'm here thinking about Sansa and Tyrion. And his reply was that, yeah, I mean, it was irregular, but it was possible, and it would have to be by the High Septon. And he was aware that this is within the context of that. And so the hint here was that that would be the route that Littlefinger would have to go down, because I personally don't think that he is going to make her a bigamist. Because everybody knows that she was married to Tyrion, and his plan, the way that he describes it to her, and I don't think we've got any reason to doubt this, but his plan was that he would pretend that she's his bastard daughter until the moment when she marries Harry the heir, at which point he's going to wash out all of the hair dye. He's going to give her Stark robes, and she's going to walk down there very clearly as Sansa Stark, and so everybody knows that she's Sansa Stark. He would not be able to do that if everybody goes, "Whoa, it's Sansa Stark! Hang on a minute, isn't she already married?" So I think that he is going to have to have got some sort of piece of paper. At the moment, of course, the High Sparrow, sorry, the High Septon is the High Sparrow, who certainly isn't the easiest person to be dealing with. The question, although the question is, how long is he going to survive? Cersei may well be wanting to take some revenge. Maybe that could be the iteration of events that Littlefinger gets the new High Septon, whoever that is, to be annulling this marriage rather than the High Sparrow. Anyway, that's all slightly sort of by the by. I don't think he's going to make Sansa a bigamist, is the sort of the point that I was trying to make there. Shira Blackwood, can Sansa end up ruling the Vale instead of the North? Maybe with Harry the Heir or Sweet Robin. That's definitely the idea. So there's this bit in the last chapter we have actually from Littlefinger when he tells her the plan, and he basically says, "So Sweet Robin's going to die because poor sickly child. Eventually he will, and then Harry's going to inherit." And then you will marry Harry, and then you get the Vale, and then all of the Knights of the Vale are going to fall in behind you as their new wonderful queen, who they wish to go and support, and you can lead them up north, and you can take the north. And so, given the fact that he is the Lord of Harrenhal, technically at this point, he will think, I've got 3 of the 7 kingdoms. That's his plan there. Is it possible? Yeah, there's nothing against it. You could rule more than one place, and I think the way that you can get around this is that if you sort of but she's only married to Harry. If she has a child with Harry, then she could then basically rule as Queen Regent all the time until that child comes of age. Callie Summers, it seems pretty likely that Littlefinger will be aware of Tyrion's marriage to Tisha. Or Tisha, never know how to pronounce that one. So could Littlefinger argue that Sansa's marriage was illegitimate anyway, leaving her available? Yeah, it's entirely possible. I mean, there are many ways that you could try to justify this. What I don't think we will have is a situation where Littlefinger's there just trying to say to everybody at this big wedding ceremony, so this is okay, guys, let me explain technically. He will have got it annulled. So somebody will say, hey, isn't she already married? Up, piece of paper from the High Septon, it's all okay, everyone, that was annulled. So that's I think the way it's going to. And the grounds for it being annulled, you can give a couple of different reasons. Yes, the idea that Tyrion was technically already married, maybe we don't know what happened to his wife. One suspects that Tywin will have made sure that it wasn't out there, this idea that Tyrion was actually technically already married, because he wanted Tyrion to be taking over the North as the lawful husband of Sansa Stark. So that will have been locked down in some way. So it's entirely possible, though we haven't heard it, that Tywin did manage to get that annulled on the quiet somewhere. But the exact grounds for the annulment, there are plenty of them that could potentially. The hard bit is not finding a reason why that marriage should be annulled. The hard bit is getting the High Septon to agree to it. Right, let's go to Yeldenil. Thank you very much for the pronunciation guide. I do care about pronunciations. I don't always get them right, and sometimes even after people have told me how to pronounce their name, I still get them wrong. But thank you very much. I hugely appreciate it. Saying hi, Robert. I am glad to be back as a patron. Fantastic to have you back as a patron. Thank you so much for the excellent content. I have a few Stark and Baratheon related ones. What do you think drew Ned to Robert? They seem to have very different personalities and morals. I get that they grew up together, but seeing how much Ned valued his honor and contrasting that to Robert's brawling and whoring and his murder of the Targaryen children, I'm a bit confused that Ned stayed friends with him. What are your thoughts? Okay, so this is obviously skipping back a generation. Ned and Robert Baratheon were best friends. But you're right. They're very different people. How were they best friends? Well, they were both fostered by Jon Arryn in the Eyrie. So they grew up together. They did everything together. They grew up like brothers, is the short answer, from quite a young age. I did look relatively recently about when Ned was fostered, but he was certainly under 10, I think. He was young. And so it was literally growing up as if this person was his brother. And they are different, but I think it's probably worth pointing out that Ned's older brother, Brandon, was in many ways quite similar to Robert Baratheon. They're both hot-headed. They both liked fighting. They both, as far as we can tell, slept with quite a few different women. Brandon certainly slept with Barbary Dustin. She was Barbary as well at the time. And Robert Baratheon, we know what he was like. So there are clear kind of similarities. And so I think that what you would find is that Ned, as still a relatively young child, he was pulled away from his brother, who he, it would appear, really looked up to. He does, whenever he thinks about him, he does seem to respect his older brother, and then being given this other brother figure who actually probably reminded him of his older brother. So that kind of did work. The way that we also kind of see Ned thinking about Robert Baratheon is almost like there's kind of like a hero worship is probably the wrong way of saying it, but he certainly puts him up on the pedestals. He had like a maiden's dream was the way he described his physique, and what we know about Ned when he was young was that he was shy. He was quiet. He was lacking in confidence. There was, just as a random example, a kind of show don't tell example, from the turning of Harrenhal, was we discovered that Ned was supposed to dance with a Shara Dane, but was too shy to ask for her hand to dance, and Brandon had to go and basically push him into it, and ask on his behalf, say, "Can you dance with with my brother?" For a child, he wasn't even a child at that point. He was older. This was on the verge of Robert's rebellion, but he was clearly, in many ways, painfully shy, and so he would have looked up to somebody like Robert Baratheon, who was not, who was all the things perhaps he wanted to be. So that kind of dynamic, I think, was what was going on there. You also asked about why Ned stayed friends after the murder of the Targaryens' children. I think this gets a bit more complicated at that point, because Robert was king. Now, we only hear of two arguments between Ned and Robert. The first was when the bodies of those two children are presented to Robert Baratheon, and he just kind of like nods and accepts it. And Ned is aghast. He flies into a temper. He's really angry about this, and he flees. He doesn't flee. He heads off that day to with his army to finish off the war, to go to Storm's End to end it. Now, there may well have been other things going on there at that time, but clearly, and Ned remembers it, that he'd had this argument at the time about the murder of those children. The second argument we have is when Robert Baratheon hears that Dany is pregnant and then says, "Right, I'm hiring an assassin." And that makes Ned quit. And he's about to leave King's Landing as well, straight away. And Littlefinger has to kind of stop him going. So this is the thing. You say, why did he stay friends with him after that? This is the big touching point between them, the thing which sparks the potential end of their friendship. And it's worth saying that although, yes, they stayed friends, Ned went up to the north. He made up with Robert Baratheon, which he had to because Robert was king. And he just got, this small baby, Jon Snow, that he had to look after, he had to protect, and part of that is to make sure that he was okay with the king, so the king didn't come after him. So he made nice with the king, and then he went north, and he didn't head down to King's Landing again. So yes, they might be friends, but for 15 years, other than a war here or there, the Greyjoy Rebellion, they didn't actually meet up. And Robert Baratheon didn't ever really give the impression of being kind of like a good pen pal. He wasn't writing lots of letters up to Ned and saying, "Oh, today, Ned, I did." That's not what it was. So there was this long period of sort of cold and silence between the two of them. Okay, let's have a quick look in the chat. Agree, Weirwood saying it had taken another death to reconcile them, Lyanna's death and the grief that they had shared over her passing. Yeah, that's another valid point. It's the reconciliation there over a shared grief was true. It wasn't just pure pragmatism that brought them back. Pragmatism was a part of it, but it wasn't just pure pragmatism. And Andrew K saying Ned had a very personal vested interest in the fate of Targaryen children to take his reaction to another level. Yeah, I mean that's absolutely right. His reaction to Robert Baratheon, first of all, killing Rhaegar's children, and then many years later showing that he would still kill those children if he came across them. They created huge responses from Ned, disproportionately emotional for him, because of what happened with Lyanna and Jon Snow. So yeah, I sort of hinted at that earlier when I said other things were going on. That was what was going on there. Yedanil saying, also asking about Gendry. We'll come back to Robb's will in just one moment, but yeah, this is another interesting question. What do you think is the significance of Gendry's profession as a blacksmith? Do you think he might learn the secrets of forging Valyrian steel? And what do you think his bull-shaped helmet might imply for his story? Well, in terms of the blacksmith thing, and will he learn to forge? I think you mean reforge Valyrian steel, so how to create it in the first place, that secret is definitely lost. But to reforge Valyrian steel is a secret that certainly his master knew. So even if he doesn't know all of the secrets of it, he probably knows better than most other people. So yes, I speculated a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was we were last talking about these similar issues, I speculated that maybe, not for certain, but maybe he will reforge some Valyrian steel into Valyrian steel weapons. He's one of the few people who might be able to do it. Secondly, there is there's an imagery thing going on here. Robert Baratheon fought with a warhammer, and Gendry uses a hammer. There's a symbolism going on there, that when Brienne sees him for the first time, she thinks he looks just like Renly, and you could imagine how people, and Ned takes a look at him and says, "Yeah, I can see that's Robert's son. He looks like him." And with the hammer, it kind of creates the whole package. So that's that bit. The interesting thing about what do you think his bull-shaped helmet might imply for the story? Now, this is an interesting one. If you've never come across this, it's there's a psychological thing going on here that may also have another level to it. So when Ned first investigates and he sees that Gendry there, and he's like, yeah, I kind of understand. This is Robert Baratheon's bastard child, and he's here in hiding. And he says, "What's that you've been making?" It's this helmet. It's a bull-shaped helmet. And Gendry reacts strongly when his master says, show it to the Lord. Do you want to buy it? And Gendry says, no, it's not for sale. This is mine. And his master, Tobey Mott, is like, oh, no, you can't say that to the hand of the king. If the hand of the king wants it, and Ned's like, no, it's okay, don't worry, he can keep it. It's fine. And it feels like a little. He's showing just a little bit of his spirit there. But then this helmet just sort of keeps going. We're told about it. He's polishing this helmet when he heads off north with Yoren, with the Night's Watch. caravan, several times he's seen sort of polishing it, and the point is made, he never wears it. He's just carrying this with him and making this shiny. Until at one point he does wear it, and that's when he goes into combat. Then it kind of saves his life, because the mountains men are there killing a whole load of people, and say who made this helmet, and he says, I did that, and it's like, oh, you're a smith. And at that time, being a smith, this was an incredibly useful skill to have, a rare skill to have, particularly at times of war, where you need a huge constant supply of new materials coming out from blacksmith. Not just we need a new sword or some new armor, but also horseshoes and things like that. So if you're a blacksmith, then they're not just going to kill you, they're going to see if they can use you. So it actually saved his life at one point. But his helmet does get stolen and taken, and it kind of moves around a bit. Polliver has it at one point. One of the other people on Arya's list has it at some point, and we kind of lose track on it. But the hint is that it ended up, when Arya there kills Polliver, I think it was, at the inn at the crossroads, her and the Hound, they kind of head off quick and don't get a chance to search through saddlebags or anything. The hint is perhaps she manages to take back her sword, Needle, but perhaps the helmet is still there. And where does Gendry end up? There. So it's possible that the helmet comes back to him. So what does all that mean? Why are we focusing in on this helmet? Well, there's a potential that this is kind of like a mirror, a light mirror, as opposed to black mirror, of the Hound's helmet, which is no longer in possession of the Hound, but everybody thinks, if somebody puts it on, they think, oh, that's the Hound, and so everything gets put down as being his responsibility, even if he didn't do it, because that's his helmet. So it's the kind of feels that is this Gendry's kind of like identity in a thematic sense, and when he puts it on, that's when he goes into battle mode and starts yelling, and he actually becomes more like his father. It's possible. So at the moment, we don't know if this is going to play a bigger role, if this is just something that George R. R. Martin is using to help tell the story of Gendry, or if it will have a bigger role in the future. It's not 100% clear. And actually, I'd be interested. I'll have a look if anyone has got any ideas about that, because I've not done a huge deep dive into it. If anyone has got any ideas about what significance that might be, drop them in the chat, and I will read some of them out. Cast Ballerina, if Robb had named Arya his heir, how would it affect the Bolton switch in Winterfell? Would Northerners accept them more, or see Arya as the ruler, not Roose? So yeah, so it's an interesting question, because Robb decided that she's dead, so he's not. That's why he didn't include her in the will. The Arya, the fake Arya, which is actually Jane Poole, was married to Ramsay Bolton in order to legitimize the claim of the Boltons to Winterfell. So it is a central part of what they are about, to pretend that that was indeed Arya. Now, if Robb had named Arya his heir, probably that wouldn't affect anything in the story so far, because that information won't have come out. Because the keepers of that knowledge have not yet made their way to Winterfell, as far as we're aware. Would this affect, when that information did come out, would this affect anything? Probably not, in as much as the kinds of people who might have that information will be the kinds of people who will go, that's actually not Arya Stark. Because the cast of people at Winterfell, and the reason why the Boltons could get away with this, is that the cast of people at Winterfell is almost completely different to the cast of people at Winterfell before. It's the people who grew up are not there. Winterfell had been burned down. Everybody's servants, everyone had been taken out, taken captive, taken to the Dreadfort. They've all gone. So the people who are there, who are witnessing this, see someone who looks like a Northern girl. They might have met Arya once or twice, but they weren't from Winterfell. They certainly weren't Stark loyalists. These are people like the Riswells and the Manderleys, who they'll visit Winterfell every now and then, but not all the time. So they will see somebody who's clearly been through a lot, who is a couple of years older than probably the last time they would have seen them. So they will. I mean, they might think, oh, that's not exactly how I remember her, but they wouldn't know any better. And then when we get to the other side of winter, Bruce's gamble will go, if anyone who was there does turn up, suddenly she's a lot older, and hopefully she's had a child, and so anyone will just say, well, she's just changed how she looks when she's got older. But if she's had a child, then probably they would be able to kill her by that point, so it didn't make much difference. So I think the answer is her being in the will, I don't think would have affected any of that um, action playing out. Let's have a quick flick through, just see got any chat. Let's go to True Yellow Dart, just talking about the helmet there. What's the significance of it? I'd say the bullhorns are more reminiscent of the staghorns on Robert's helmet. Yeah, absolutely. That's another way, another angle of looking at it. Donna Daley, hi there, saying, hi, Robert. Sorry if this has been already asked. Does Robb's will override the natural succession? Is Jon the rightful heir above Bran because of the will? Well, we've sort of covered this from a few different angles, but we've not sort of answered this one direct. Possibly, but possibly not, because this is when it suddenly gets into this kind of weird line of succession thing. And what does it say in the will? I suspect that in all other things being equal, if Robb's will says, because Bran is dead, Jon is my heir, and then Bran turned up, everyone would go, oh, actually, Bran probably should inherit. But at the same time, he is still young, and they might think, well, Jon is now of age; he should rule. It's this kind of thing where we can try and work out what the technical rule of the law is here, but the reality is what people on the ground decide they want. And if people on the ground decide that they want Jon rather than Bran, then Jon is what will happen, unless Jon turns around and says, no, it should be Bran. So it's the kind of the legal niceties that we go with these days in thinking about lines of succession. Oh, this person, if this person is to succeed, or what does the law say in this particular situation? That is absolutely fine until we get to a situation as complex as this at a time of war, when it's really the reality on the ground that matters most. Let's go to Maura Lee. Hi there, Maura. Great to see you. Saying just a show of love and support. Love you and Dan, your handsome dog. You are the best. Well, thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. And you also followed up with for all the fabulous mods and amazing folks in the chat. Thank you, Maura. Yeah, I hugely appreciate your support. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I have got a question from a couple of questions, I think, for you coming up a bit later, which I will answer when we get to them. And Ranabir Mitra also saying for the mods and for your excellent X post today. Oh yeah, I had a little bit of a rant about football over on X. I do one football post per year because people don't come here for my football opinions. So I limit myself to one per year. This year's one. I had to get a few things off my chest. Anyway, we're not talking about that here. Right, let's go to question from Relaxed Like a Cat saying, hi Robert, what do you think about Rickon becoming king of the North? It sounds like something that wouldn't work out well for him, leading to another Stark taking his place. Also, will Dan the dog make an appearance in the future live stream? I would, yes, if he just takes himself up to bed very early these days. And I do mean it. I keep on forgetting, but I will take pictures of him, and so I'll put them back out there so you can see him. I know lots of people would like to. What do I think about Rickon becoming king? Something that wouldn't work out well for him, leading to another Stark taking his place. Yeah. So a lot of this is the iteration. Who appears at what point? The other thing we have to remember is that Rickon is still very young. As in, I think this is the kind of thing that somebody will be able to easily and quickly check, but I think in story he's still only like 5. So him becoming king is not like, let's see what Rickon can do. We get used to on the TV show, because the actors all aged up over time. We think of them as being older than they are in the books. Some of them are still very, very young. And George R. Martin did famously abandon his original plan to have a 5-year gap where everybody could age up. He's abandoned that, so some children will remain children for the rest of this story. Let's go to a question from Commander Ray saying, hello Robert, hope all is well. I will probably be pretty busy Thursday evenings in the near future, so glad I get to watch this one live. When Jon learns of Robb's will proclaiming Jon a Stark and heir, how do you think that would affect his motivation to take the North? Would he be more aggressive at pushing his claim, knowing his brother wanted it for him? And deeper, will this cause internal conflict when he learns he's actually a Targaryen and not a bastard? So accepting one identity could be turning away from the other. I feel they will play a great role in the dynamic. This will play a great role in the dynamic of the Stark family, and that will be the most curious thing to see play out. Yeah. So I mean, I think I sort of covered off a little bit earlier, talking about Jon's personal ambitions and things like that, but let's take this one step further beyond the immediate issue of the will. The most likely situation, based on what we've been looking at, is that at some point in the medium term, Jon will be, if not the recognized king of the North, he will be the de facto leader of the North. Stannis may well still be around, but the will have come to light. He will be legitimized, and as is the way of these things, people will be suspicious of Sansa. Rickon will still be very young. Bran will probably not want to do it. Arya probably not want to do it. It by default, it will probably end up being Jon there. Added to which, he is the kind of guy that people do seem to gather around and follow. Psychologically, he's been wanting to be a Stark for such a long period of time. That should give him some kind of peace. This kind of recognition that finally he is this who he wanted to be as he was growing up. However, I suspect that peace will not be easy for him, because he's got this recurring dream about Winterfell and the Winterfell crypts. And as we go, he has it all the way through the stories, and each time it sort of gets a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further, and he sort of wanders around Winterfell and he heads down into the crypts. And when he's there, the statues are sort of all saying to him, "This is not your place. You do not belong here." Um, but there's something he needs to see, experience, somewhere he needs to get to. Now, I think that the hints within the text are that the thing that he needs to see is the statue of his true mother, Lyanna. Now, uh, what? How does this matter then? Is that even when he's been legitimized, made a Stark, uh, there's a fair chance that he still won't feel 100% right with it, because he's still going to get these dreams, and because he still does not know who his mother is. Bloodraven is there behind the scenes. He'll be wanting to tee him up for this idea that he is actually Rhaegar's son. He's the prince that was promised. So all of that is going to be pushing at him, and don't think that he's going to be resting easy. He may well find himself in this position where everyone's there going, Jon Stark, King of the North, and he doesn't feel it. So what would happen then when he does discover his true Targaryen identity? And yes, I know there will be people, you may be thinking to yourself, well, he is. Why on earth would the statues be saying, you're not a Stark, you don't belong here? Because he didn't have a place there in the crypts. The crypts were with members of the Stark family, and he was not one of them, so there was not a place set aside for him there. He is not, and who is a part of the Stark family. Well, we're not told the exact rules of this, but it does appear to be the Lord of the Starks and their children. So although he technically is a child, people think a bastard child of Ned Stark, because he's a bastard child, then he's not in there. And he might think, well, I'm now legitimized, therefore I should be in there. But if he finds out that he's technically a Targaryen, again, that's not his place. So, yeah, it's going to get complicated. And I think that the meta narrative with Jon is that this is going to get harder and harder for him. He's not going to, whereas we get somebody like Sansa, who is going to get back up to Winterfell and think, this is my place. That is her arc. Almost certainly that is her arc, is that having spent the start of this story desperately wanting to get away from Winterfell, desperately wanting to go down to King's Landing where all the cool kids were, she's working her way back up, and she's starting to realize that all of these stories and songs and legends that she's heard, what the truth of them is, and actually her safe place is Winterfell. That's her kind of arc. Jon is not going to get that happy arc. He's going to be constantly uncertain of his identity. He will be made a Stark but not feel like a Stark. He will be declared a Targaryen but not really feel like a Targaryen because he's been brought up as Stark. He will have been made Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, but not because he particularly went for it, and a significant proportion turned against him. He's not going to have this kind of safe place, and so this is why at the end of all of this, I feel he is the Frodo figure. He is the person who is going to play a huge role in saving humanity in one way and another, but not for him. He will save the Seven Kingdoms through his actions, not just him, but he's going to be central to this, but not for him. And he will have to, in the same way Frodo had to leave Middle-earth in the end because he'd saved it, but not for himself. Jon is going to go and head north beyond the wall because he saved the Seven Kingdoms, but not for himself. So that's the sort of the overall narrative arc for him, is that yes, he may well be made the Lord of Winterfell, a natural Stark, but he's not going to find peace in that. Right, let's go to Reflective Rambling. Welcome, good to see you. And let's go to a question from Gabriel Farrell saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you haven't taken last night's results too hard." I'm recovering. Take solace in the fact that you're likely far less hungover today than many Spurs fans, myself very much included. Well, congratulations to Tottenham. I think you deserve the win, and it's been a very long time coming for a trophy for you. So well deserved, and I hope you enjoy it. Probably the most obvious question to ask, but what do you make of? What do you think the party that avoided the Red Wedding and are aware of the will, Mage Mormont and Ethan Glover, if I remember rightly, it's Gilbert Glover, not Ethan Glover, actually. What have they been up to? Are they in the neck with Howland Reed? If so, how long will they have been there? What do you think they've been doing, and what role do you see them playing in the story moving forward? Well, all good questions. I will use this as an opportunity to set out the witnesses, because we've got a clear set of witnesses here. So these are people who know the contents of Robb's will. They will also variously be aware that Robb is now dead. So they will know that John has been legitimized, and John, although John does not yet know this, is the new heir, the new king. And the will is not just the reason you have the witnesses, they all sign it, is not just that you have a piece of paper, but you have character witnesses who all will be able to say, yeah, that's what it said. And those people who were in the room were Catelyn Stark, Great John Umber, Edmure Tully, Mage Mormont, Gilbert Glover, Jason Mallister, and Reynald Westerling. Now, it's worth noting where all of these characters are. Catelyn Stark, we know about, obviously. She died at the Red Wedding, but has come back as Lady Stoneheart. And she is... she holds Robb's crown. And she is actively hunting for her daughters, for Arya in particular. So where does she fit in on this? She knows what Robb's will was, but all the implications are that she has decided that Robb decided that John should be the heir because he thought that Arya was dead. And so if she finds Arya, she will probably try and crown Arya. That's just an instant, and I don't know whether that will happen, but that seems to be where she's going with this. Lots of people have thought maybe this will be a great moment for her to come to terms with John and sort of get be at peace with him. Nothing about her character since she has returned has suggested that she's become a nicer, more forgiving personality. Let's put it that way. Quite the opposite. So, almost certainly, what she thought about and felt at the time of her death is what she is carrying on forward. But she is not, as far as we can tell, certainly in the near future, she is not heading all the way up to the north with the news of Robb's will. She is not there with the intention of spreading information about Robb's will to anyone. So she's the first one. Reynald Westerling is part of House Westerling, which is where Jane Westerling was from. He was kind of friends with Robb. And at the Red Wedding, when everything went wrong, he actually released Grey Wind and got killed for it. Or at least we're 95% certain he got killed. It's like one of those, but they never found the body. No, he was peppered with arrows, and his bloody footprints took him to the river. Almost certainly he's dead. But that's the last we've seen of him. Edmure Tully obviously got captured at the Red Wedding, so he's still alive. He is now married to the Freys, and he is being moved from the Riverlands across to the Westerlands. Though my working theory is that he may well end up being freed in the prologue, to the Winds of Winter. Great John Umber is still a captive in the Twins. Jason Mallister got back to Seaguard, which is his hometown, but the Freys had captured his son, I think it was, and basically threatened to kill him, and so he's now under house arrest in his own castle. So he's not going anywhere. So far, Reynold Westerling's not going anywhere. Jason Mallister's not going anywhere. Great John Umber's not going anywhere. Edgar Tully's not going anywhere, or hasn't been anywhere. And Catelyn Stark is not going to be telling anybody, oh, actually, that Jon Snow, he's now the king. So none of these people are going to be spreading the news, which means we've got two people left, Maege Mormont and Gelbert Glover. Now, which is the two that you were referencing earlier. Robb gave them a mission. They weren't there at the Red Wedding. You're entirely right. He gave them a mission, which was connected in with his plan to retake the North. In order to do that, he wanted to start by taking Moat Cailin. Now, Moat Cailin was a formidable castle. It's on this causeway which goes through the neck. You have to go through it, past it, basically, in order to get to the north. But although it has now fallen largely into ruin, there are 3 towers of it left. And it's basically described as, if you're coming from the south, it is still a death trap. So Robb's thought was, I'm not going to just march my troops from the south up towards it. That's not going to work. I need a clever way of doing this. And so he sent 2 of his most trusted people, Maege Mormont and Gelbert Glover, into the neck to try to find Howland Reed and House Reed, the Crannog men, with a view to, well, they can do kind of like a sneaky attack, and that can help, and I can sort of bring a feint with my main force, and then so I'll sneak some of them around the back and attack from the north at the same time. It'll all be good. But first of all, we've got to make contact with Howland Reed, because he's the only one really who knows the rest of that kind of like the marshland around that area. If you don't know where you're going, then you're going to die. So he sent them off, and we've heard nothing from them since. Now, obviously, they will have headed in there, said, well, here's the plan, Howland. Robb's going to start marching his troops up there, then we'll intercept them en route and get some of them and guide them around. And then Howland will have gone, no, hang on. Okay, the plans have changed. Robb's dead. All of that army's gone. So we're not doing that anymore. At which point, we're not told what happens. Probably, as another tangent to this whole story, Ned's bones, which Cat had sent up a little while earlier, on that same road, which would have gone through Moat Cailin, probably they are there as well. I did a whole video on that. If you're interested, you can sort of like try and work out what the different possibilities are for where they are. But they definitely headed up that way. We have no record of them getting to Moat Cailin, which, when they set off, hadn't fallen. But by the time they would have reached it, it probably would have done. Cat's not 100% certain whether they would have got through in time. But we do know that on the other side, Barbary Dustin's keeping an eye out for anything coming through, which might be Ned's bones, because she's got her own issues to work through, but she basically wants to capture those bones. And they've not emerged on the other side. So the working assumption there is that Howland Reed has also grabbed that group of people, the Silent Sisters and Harris Mollen and Ned's bones, and they're probably chilling out in the neck as well, at Greywater Watch. So you've actually suddenly got this group of Stark loyalists all sat there in Greywater Watch. And what are they going to do? Well, I think that a lot depends on what Howland Reed wants to do, because he's the person with all of the institutional memory about what's actually really going on with this plot. And I think that they will want to be recovering the North. And so in whatever way, shape or form they can, they will want to be supporting what the movements that are going in the North. And I've got a sort of a very slow ad hoc series going on about what's happening in the North. And I will get to that, this kind of like Great Northern Conspiracy at some point soon. So they want to be supporting that. I'll come on to this. I've got a question about this specifically, actually, in a little bit. Hallis Mollen, I think, might already be up in Winterfell. But once that's all sorted, then they can sort of like, then Howland and people can emerge and they can bring the bones up. Pardon me. The question that I've got is it possible that Galbert Glover or Mage Mormont might have realised, hang on a moment, we're probably the only people here who know who the rightful king of the North is at the moment. We need to get up to the North. We need to get to the wall, and we need to tell Jon Snow that he's legitimised, that he's the new king of the North. So it would not surprise me if one or possibly two of them have headed north in a sneaky way that nobody knows. The North is quite big, and so there will be ways there. You can also take a boat all the way around, up past Bear Island, and then up to the wall at the far western end and work your way across. There are different things. There are things that you can do in order to bypass the bits of security that the Freys and the Dustins and the Boltons may have set up there. I think that probably they are there, heading, at least one of them, heading to the wall. So, did that answer your question? Are they in the neck? How long have they been there? A while, if they are still there. But I think their role is they are the people who are going to let everyone know about the will. Cat's not going to do it. Most of the rest are all captive. So yeah, I think that's going to be them. Had a question somewhere in the chat to catch up on. The Dancing Rat saying, if King Robb used his will to revoke Jon's Night's Watch vows and legitimise him as a Stark, and everyone believes Jon is Ned's son, would he then come before Bran in the line of succession? Yeah, so we've had this sort of question a moment ago, actually. So I won't go into too much detail, but everybody thinks that Bran is dead. So at the moment, he is the next. He's not just that he's next in the line of succession. He is the king now. In Robb's mind, he would then become first in line. But the clear implication is that Robb was not thinking, "Oh, who's actually going to succeed me?" Robb was not thinking that he was going to die. This was a just in case kind of thing. He was thinking, "I'll have kids and they'll be next after me." When Bran turns up, that's when the complications come, because the will was clearly predicated on the idea that Bran was dead. And if he's not, then people might rally behind him and say that they want to have him as king. Personally, I think Bran's going to be less of an issue, because when he does turn up, I don't think he's there going to be saying, I want to be king, I want to be taking this away from Jon. And I don't think he's going to have a huge amount of people coming in behind him saying that either at that point. It will take a while for Bran to get to Winterfell, because he's quite a long way north, and because most of the potential ways that they might get to the south are quite slow. Unless there is some have speculated this, unless there's some kind of like subterranean river that they can just sort of like get up. There is something like that in the bottom of Blood Raven's cave, it would appear, but a river that goes all the way down to Winterfell that they can somehow get out of that, unless they can do something unexpected like that. If this is just going to be a matter of Mira dragging Bran south, it's going to be quite a slow rate and a long time before they get there. At which point, probably Jon will be well established there at Winterfell, whether he likes it or not. Let's go to Ranabe Mitra saying, "Salutations, Robert and Dan the dog." I did note your humour there with the wildfire. I'm in a better place today. Your video about Robb's will was brilliant, and it perfectly describes the intrigue behind it. But I want to pose the same question. Thank you very much, Billy. I wanted to pose the same question that I asked in the video via comments, which I've forgotten entirely what question I asked. Keeping George R.R. Martin's concept of the Myronese knot as a reference point, what do you feel is a good way the events in the north can play out when Galbert and Mage head up north with the will? What sequence of events would result in the best narrative story or result for the northern plotline involving the will? For me, the narrative purpose of the will is to create a succession crisis and a potential conflict between the Stark children and Jon. Do you remember George R. R. Martin's original outline for this series, particularly when he planned for a conflict between Bran and Jon? Can the events surrounding the will be a catalyst for making this point in the original outline come true? I know the story has deviated a lot, but some of these original plot points can still come true. Okay, so quite a few different points there. So let's work through them. The conflict between Bran and Jon in the original idea. The original idea, if you've not come across it, I think I did a video on this a while ago. George R. R. Martin wrote a 3-page letter when he'd started writing A Song of Ice and Fire. He'd written the first 13 chapters, I think, by this point, and he was pitching it to his editors. And or his agent, I can't remember exactly who it was, but he wrote a sort of a summary of the story. And what's fascinating, endlessly fascinating, you can Google it, you can find the picture of this has emerged on the internet and is now out there. There are a couple of bits that have been redacted as things that may or may not happen in future books. But what's intriguing is the things that are the same, the basic structure, character names, things like that, and also the things that are very different. And for example, a love triangle between Jon and Arya and Tyrion. Yes, it gets weird at times, but there is a bit in that when I think it's Cat, Bran, and Arya head up to the wall because Winterfell has been sacked, and they head up to the wall hoping to get shelter. And the Night's Watch say, "No, we can't do that. We're independent, and that would mean us taking sides in a conflict, so you can't stay here." And this leads to a conflict between Bran and Jon, because Bran there saying, "But you're my brother, why don't you let me stay?" And Jon says, "I'd love to, but I can't." So that causes a problem, and then Bran and Co go north of the wall. Am I expecting that to happen or anything like that to happen in the books? Personally, no, not those specific circumstances. Might George be setting this up to keep the conflict between Bran and Jon, but come at it from a different angle? I like the thinking, but it doesn't quite hang. I don't think that there's for me, Bran is there he will be sort of Team Bloodraven in a way, and Jon is also, unknownst to himself, Team Bloodraven. I don't think there's going to be a huge clash going on there, added to which I don't think either of them naturally want to be king, so I don't think there will be a personal clash there. So I think that's going to be one of the things that does not pick up from the original conception. In terms of the Myronese knot and what sequence of events, for those who don't know the Myronese knot, this was way back when we were waiting for A Dance with Dragons to be published, and George R. R. Martin was very apologetic. It was taking a very long time to write A Dance with Dragons. Happy times. And eventually it was published, and he kind of followed this up with an explanation of why it had taken him so long. And he called this the Myronese knot, which is in because a lot of A Dance with Dragons is based around the long arc of Dany in Meereen. And what happens with her in that book, and also later on, is a lot of people come to her um, and interact with her in Meereen. And he uh, was struggling with this idea of what order these people should arrive in. Now, a lot of these people actually still haven't arrived yet in the story, but you've got Marwyn the Mage, you've got Tyrion, and Jorah is returning. We've got Victarion there. The example he gave was Quentyn, and he said Quentyn Martell, who arrives, and he says that he had in his mind maybe Quentyn could arrive before Dany gets married. He could arrive well after she's married, or she could arrive at the time that she's getting married, like a day before. And he wasn't sure which was the best way to do this. So he tried each of these options, and he just wrote. It's like going from his main narrative, and he like wrote off 3 different branches just to see which worked best. And then eventually he realized that what worked best for him was this idea that Quentyn arrives the day before Dany's due to be married, and that created the best kind of narrative going forward. And this was before Tyrion arrived, for example, and that's the kind of sequencing issue he had. And the way he was talking about this was, if you imagine a whole load of bits of string, and he's just trying to unravel them all. They're in this knot, Myronese knot, and he had to kind of unravel all of these different strands of story to work out what order people were going to be coming in. So that concept, I think that probably explains a lot about what's happening with the delays to the Winds of Winter, because he hasn't just got one place in the story where it's a matter of what order do people arrive in. He's got lots of different places where it's a matter of what order do people arrive in. Just in the Riverlands. The Riverlands is the classic example I use a lot because it's very clear. We've got so many of these different actors. We've got Lady Stoneheart with the Brotherhood Without Banners. We've got Brienne. We've got Jaime. We've got the Blackfish out there. We've got the former garrison from Riverrun who's out there. We've got this train which is heading, a wagon train which is heading off with the prisoners west. We've got the Hound, who's probably still out there somewhere. We've got this super pack of wolves. We've got loads of these different moving parts, and they could all interact with each other at various points. And it's really a matter of that where the story goes will vary according to which order these different people meet different other people and what they do. So that feels to me like a Riverlands knot. But with Winterfell and the Stark children knot, what is the best order for the Starks to arrive? I mean, for the narrative arc, my take is that I agree that one of the points about this will is to be creating this kind of Stark succession crisis, which is not so much about the Starks themselves, but about their backers. But I think that actually the order of when people arrive is almost set for him. So we know, first up, we've got Rickon and or Jon, because they're both the timings. If Davos has found Rickon and he's bringing him over to the Mandalese to Winterfell, then he will be arriving at some point in the next month or two, one would have thought. Ditto John, who knows how long he's going to be there before he comes back, but then heading south from the wall, that will take a couple of weeks or so, I think it is. So those two will probably arrive first. Sansa, her timeline depends on, she's got to, first of all, get married to Harry the Heir, and then the troops have to be gathered together and then taken off. So that's going to be after the John and Rickon are both there. He could extend or expand or contract the time that she's in Bravos to whatever he wants, but it's still a little way away. She's got to get across the narrow sea and then over. She's definitely also not going to be arriving before Rickon and John, and then Bran is the furthest away, and so he will probably arrive last. That kind of order is largely set. So I don't think he's going to have as many issues. It's a matter of just working out what happens when each of these different people arrive. Donna Daley saying there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Catelyn knows this. Did she forget when Robb was writing his will? While John might not count, random cousins certainly wouldn't. Did she think about that? Well, so there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. There hasn't been a Stark in Winterfell. And so Cat will be very aware. To her sort of interaction with the North is she's not a Northerner herself, obviously, but she does kind of respect the Northern traditions, so she will want there to be a Stark in Winterfell, but she'll be aware of the fact that Winterfell has fallen and it needs to be taken back first before you can put a Stark in there. From Kat's perspective, she hadn't. It would appear she normally thinks ahead about these things, but she appears to have been kind of caught or blindsided a little bit by this because she didn't have an immediate suggestion as to a name of who it should be. But her thinking could very well have been, if she'd spent some time working through this, that if you pick whoever that is the next, technically the next in line, if it's from a Corbray, then the Corbrays, perhaps they could come and retake Winterfell. And what Robb could do is, as king, he could say, kings can do what they want. That person is now a Stark. I hereby, as king, say you are now a member of House Stark. Now that person, if they're over in the Vale, they could just ignore it and say, well, yeah, you're not my king. I wish to stay a Corbray or whatever else, the Templeton or whatever it was that they are. But probably they wouldn't. So I think it's not a matter of like her not understanding that there should be a Stark in Winterfell. There isn't one in there at the moment. The only way that there will be is if an army goes and takes it back, and then it's a matter of how do you get that army. And also, again, she was not thinking that her son would die. She was thinking that Robb was going to go and reclaim Winterfell. Who's there? Somebody say in the chat saying it always has to be about Bloodraven. He's such a diva. That's Erin Son X. Yeah, he is, and it does always have to be about Bloodraven. If you're regular on this channel, you will know that to be the case. Kelly Summers saying, I hope George R. R. Martin saves all his drafts. Maybe one day we'll get a book of unfinished tales for Planetos. Yes, I mean, I wouldn't wish to wish ill on him, but yes, he, as far as I'm aware, he has, in particular, the one chapter which he has mentioned, which is also in Dance with Dragons, in this context of here's a chapter that didn't quite make it in, and he's basically said he's not going to release it certainly while he's still writing the rest of the story. He thinks it was quite good, but he's not going to release it, and probably not until after he dies. And it's a Tyrion chapter in the Sorrows. In the Shy Maid is heading down. He's on the boat there with young Griff and that really quite fun group of them all heading down the Shy Maid, and they go through the Sorrows, Troyrain, this ancient city which was destroyed basically by the Targaryens, but also by the calling down of water magic, river roiling magic. And since then, it's been shrouded in this mists. And this is where the stone men are. If you've got grayscale, you get sort of shipped up to there, and that's where you stay with all the other people who've got grayscale, and eventually you turn into a statue. Lots of mysterious stuff going on there. And he said he did this chapter where Tyrion he falls off the boat, but then he kind of gets off and he meets the Shrouded Lord, who's this legendary figure, the leader of the Stone Men. And he has really interesting interactions there, and he heads back and he gets back on the Shy Maid and carries on his journey. And George R. Martin says he really enjoyed that, but it didn't fit the narrative for Tyrion. He didn't want him to be going down that magical path at that point. Maybe later, maybe we'll go with the dragons and things like that, who knows, but he felt that just distracted away from that narrative point of what was happening with Tyrion at that time. And so he said he's written the chapter, he thinks it's good, but he's put it in his desk drawer, and we're not going to see it. So yes, he does keep hold of these things. Maybe at some maybe at some point we will see some of these drafts of other versions of the story that might have happened. The garden paths that led to nowhere. That's probably too tortured an analogy for his writing style, but I'm not while he's still writing the main story, though. Right, where were we? Let's go to a question from Alhad. In which order will the Stark children, including Jon, get involved in the Winterfell plot? What will happen to Stannis and the Boltons by that time? When will the Northern Lords come to know about the will? In short, how will the Winterfell plotline evolve? Though the final outcome of this is almost certainly King Jon, I think that the enforcement of Robb's will depend upon this Winterfell knot. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've talked about the timings there. The bit that you ask about that I haven't picked up on in answering other questions, I think, is what happens to Stannis and the Boltons. So Stannis is a fascinating one, because Stannis, his cunning plan was that he was going to sort of head around in this arc. Jon suggested it to him, actually, head around in this arc in the north, gathering bannermen to his side who could then join his army, who would take back Winterfell. And basically what his pitch to them was, I will free you from all these people who've been oppressing you, the Ironborn, the Boltons. I will give you back the North, you Northerners, as long as you bend the knee. And quite a few have sort of gone along with that. But what happens to Stannis? Does he survive? George R. Martin, a long time ago, went to great pains to say that Stannis was very much alive and well in his story, which led many people to think, oh, does this mean that he is going to survive here? Because obviously at this point in the TV show, we have the first Battle of Winterfell, which is like what we will call the Battle of Ice, which is very much pending in the story. And he dies after that. But the way that he dies after that is because Brienne's there, and Brienne's not there. So that's not going to happen like that. So I think the working assumption is he's going to survive that first battle. I won't go to all the ins and outs of that, but he has a plan. And even if he didn't have a plan, the army coming to face him, although the Freys will very much be wanting to be attacking him, the Manderleys, who are the other part of this army, will not, and almost certainly will turn on the Freys. So I think he will survive that. But then he's still outside Winterfell in the middle of winter, at which point I suspect we will get Melisandre doing some magic to ease the weather, which will allow him to go back in and take on Winterfell, and we get this second battle of Winterfell. And that's the point at which I suspect Jon will have arrived down, having come down. And it's possible that Stannis does not survive that. If he does, then I think that the North will probably wish to rally behind Jon. And so what does Stannis do? Well, Jon will probably wish to be diplomatic and say, well, look, I'm not claiming to be a rival king, but I will be here. And what we have to do first is to save the Seven Kingdoms from the others. And so let's turn our attention to that. So Stannis, various people have said there's bits of foreshadowing for this, but he could well end up at the Nightfort, leading the defense of the wall there. Which would be interesting. What happens to the Boltons? Well, I think ultimately the Boltons will discover that their grip on power was not as strong as they thought it was. Roose was very much banking on the fact that winter was going to happen, and he could solidify his control of the North over winter when nobody's going to be doing big campaigns. He can stay in Winterfell and that would all be okay. But that's not going to happen. And when we get this big army opposing him that has got Starks that they can rally behind, a lot of these people who have been there on his side will turn against him. And the Boltons will, I think, fundamentally lose. So they're not going to go easily, but I think the Boltons will be pushed out of the way. I think Stannis will end up at the wall, and we will end up with Jon being this, by default, Lord of Winterfell. As Ballerina saying, since he was ultimately willing to free Jon of his Night's Watch vows, do you think Robb would have executed Jon for desertion had he left the wall to fight for him pre-will legitimization? So this is I take it this is when Jon, you're thinking back to when Jon did desert the wall, right at the very, it's not the very beginning of the story, but in book one, you'll remember it. He headed out. He'd heard what had happened. He decided he had to go south with Jon, to go because his father had been captured and killed, and Robb's heading south. He has to be, well, at this point, Ned hadn't been captured, but he had to head south. But Jon doesn't succeed in quitting the Night's Watch. His friends go after him, but fundamentally, if you read that, just as a complete aside, if you read that section when Jon is there trying to escape, you'll find it's Ghost who stops him. He's there trying to go nice and quiet, but then Ghost is like making a lot of noise and attracting the attention of his friends so that they can come and cut him off. And again, working assumption on this channel, when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. Bloodraven does seem to walk into Ghost quite a lot, and this will definitely be in Bloodraven's interest to prevent Jon from quitting the wall. So that was probably what was going on there. But to answer your question, if he had managed to escape, if he had managed to get all the way down, would Robb have allowed him to join the army and go and fight? I think it's quite an interesting one because it's, I mean, I have to admit that there are times when the sequencing of these things, it's been a little while since I've read that. Someone in the chat will be able to tell me whether this is technically before or after he takes his vows. If this is before, then that doesn't matter. If this is after, then Robb in that situation was facing a whole series of challenges from his lords, because they all, in their different ways, that they arrive, they challenge. He's very young. He's what, 15? They challenge his authority and his leadership. You'll remember Great John Umber did that, and Grey Wind leapt over the table and bit off some of his fingers. In different ways, he has to show them that he's in charge. I think the question is with John, whether anybody would have used John as a way to undermine Robb, in which case he might have to do something he wouldn't want to do. His instinct would have been to welcome John in, I'm sure. Question from Martin S. Evening, Robert. Evening to you, Martin. Just wanted to say good night. I hope all is well with you. Well, good night to you too. And things are very well with me. Thank you very much. Let's go. Yeah, Rabbi Mitra was saying after. I'm guessing. Yeah, I'm guessing it was after as well. Let's go to a question from Maura Lee, saying, Robert, how much of a role will Lady Stoneheart play regarding Robb's will and the determination of who is Robb's rightful heir? So, yeah, I sort of touched on this earlier, but let's unpack this a bit more. So, Lady Stoneheart will know what is in the will. She will know that Robb is now dead, and therefore, according to his will, the heir is John, who has been legitimized. However, when you read the chapters that we see her in, she's there spinning the crown. This is her focus. This is Robb's crown. And when we see what her Brotherhood without banners are doing now, they're getting their revenge on Freys and Lannisters, but they're also asking questions about her daughters. So if her objective was to follow Robb's last will and testament, which she knows, that crown will have been making its way to the north. It's not. She was firmly of the opinion that Arya was still alive, and that Robb was in the wrong to name John, because Arya should have inherited before him. So what is her role? She's not telling people about the will. She is looking for Arya because she wants to crown Arya. And she's not going to head north. She's stuck in the Riverlands for the foreseeable future. So she's not going to go to the Northerners and be spreading the word. So her role is actually against this will. It's we often think about the witnesses here. Which of these witnesses is going to be telling people about it? She's got no motivation to tell people about it at all. Maura Lee also asking, in the books, Jon Snow was killed, and we know that eventually he will be brought back to life. What does that mean for Jon Snow's future with the Night's Watch, his Stark inheritance, the prophecy of the Prince that was promised, and the others? On the TV show, he eventually leaves the Night's Watch and becomes the king in the north. Sansa succeeds him as queen. How do you see all this eventually play out in the books? Well, I've covered quite a bit of that in different bits of the stream already. I mean, what I would say is that I don't, in terms of his future with the Night's Watch, I think he's a short-term abandoned the Night's Watch. He'd made that decision. He's abandoned his place and his vows. He'd made that decision before he was killed, and he's going to follow through with that in the sort of when he comes back. It's actually quite a fun thing to do if you're wanting to sort of speculate towards what won't happen in the Winds of Winter. George R. Martin writes books with characters having an arc in each book. At a high level, they've got this arc. You can see in Tyrion is a very good example. Book one, he goes from being this sort of the character is at the beginning. He's arrogant, but he's likable and intelligent. He thinks he understands the world, but he's really not valued by his family, particularly his father. And he ends that having to rely on his wits, but with his father saying, "I'm entrusting you to be acting hand of the king." So his arc has taken him from a place where he didn't think he was ever going to get that responsibility, and he's basically doing whatever he wants, to a point where he's now getting this responsibility. First arc. And then you can trace within each of the books what his arc is. So in the most recent book, for example, Dance with Dragons, he arrives having drunk himself across the narrow sea, and he sees no future for him at all. He's got these his father's death is on his mind. Where do whores go? Is this thought what his father said to him? He's got his brain is trying to sort through things, but he's still, he's given this idea of here's Daenerys, we should go and see her. Maybe you can get in behind her. And he's, oh yeah, well, maybe she'll help me kill Cersei. He's not in a good place. And his arc there in the final book is where he goes on this journey and he starts to become more himself. He's learning about, he's writing a book about dragons, which takes him back. He loves dragons. He's writing the book about dragons. Everything that he had is stripped away from him. He ends up, he's a slave at the very, or near the very end of it. He has no money. He has no, his name matters very little. It gets him right to the very end of this story, when he's there in a position finally he can see the dragons and he's at Meereen, and that's the point at which he can start working his way back up, which will be the next book. I say all this because it's quite a fun game if you're trying to think about what happens with the story in The Winds of Winter, is to go, well, what would be the arc for different characters? And some of them we think we might be able to guess. John's is quite funny because you can go, well, we know the action, we think he's going to come back from the dead, we think he's going to head to Winterfell. Where's his arc going to be from starting off being at the wall with the Night's Watch to being the Lord of Winterfell? Is that his arc there? And then at the end of the next book, that's when he's discovering about being a Targaryen. Is that the arc for the final book for him? Where do we actually think he's going to end up? Actually, tell me in the chat, where do you think he's going to be at the end of this book? Is he going to go back up to the wall? Is he going to be king, stood there at the wall? Or will he be in Winterfell? It's quite interesting. Something along those lines in that arc is going to happen, but exactly where he's going to end up, I don't know. Let me know. Yeah, let me know in the chat where you think he will end up. DickCrabb'sSquire, what are your thoughts about the hooded man being a saboteur inside Winterfell and the early murders connected to him, avoiding being caught? One man was killed in the stables, Theon thinking more that it was a blow to the head rather than a kick by a horse. And later that night, the stables collapsed, eliminating many of the Bolton horses. Okay, so I did do a video on the hooded man in Winterfell, which is kind of like a blink and you miss it thing. But it's created a lot of debate. Theon is wandering around Winterfell. He's basically been given his freedom-ish by Roose Bolton, and he's wandering around in the snow at Winterfell, and the snow is really bad there. Snow, I mean, doors are covered up, the gates are frozen solid. It's like snow drifts 20, 30, 40 feet high, 10 meters more high. And he's wandering around, and this is called, the chapter is the Ghost in Winterfell, and in a way he's a ghost in Winterfell, but he's thinking he's seeing ghosts from his past everywhere, and he's going through all of this process, and then this figure comes towards him, who kind of stops and then says, "Theon Turncloak, Theon Kinslayer, you were supposed to be dead," or words to that effect. And then he says, "I'm not, but Ramsay's got me in his clutches." And then the guy had his hand on his dagger and goes, "Okay, well, I'll leave you to him then," and then heads off. And that's pretty much it. It's all done and dusted in a couple of paragraphs. But it's clear that this figure is kind of like slightly out of context. Firstly, what clues do we have? So who is this person? George R. R. Martin is clearly giving us this some clues as to who this might be. And we get a few. This person seems to know Winterfell. They're out there striding in a snowstorm where we're told that you couldn't see your hand outstretched in front of your face. This person's striding around, and their cloak is flapping out behind them, so they're clearly used to the weather, and they also know where they're going, so they know Winterfell. They recognize Theon straight away, but thought that he was dead, which clearly implies that they're relatively recently there, because Theon had been around in Winterfell for a little bit by that point. He took quite a prominent role in Ramsay and Jane's wedding. So this person didn't know that. So he's relatively recently arrived in Winterfell. And also, he very clearly wants Theon dead, but is not willing to do it just there and then, not willing to risk it. So and the fact that he calls him Kinslayer and Turncloaks, very clear this is a Stark loyalist of some kind, somebody who knew him growing up and considered him to be the brother of Bran and Rickon. So those are the clues that we've got going on there. Now, my best, I have a look at the video. I know there's lots of really interesting ideas out there. Have a look at the video if you want the detailed description of this. But my best guess is that this is Hallis Mollen, who was the guy who was entrusted by Cat, pardon me, to bring Ned's bones up to Winterfell. And he's described as being, he is a Stark loyalist, but he's also described as sort of saying things out loud that are obvious, like stopping and then just saying Theon's name at him. Feels very Hallis Mollen. So it's that's my best guess. It fits all of the other clues. Stark loyalist, probably only just arrived, knows who Theon is, wants Theon dead, and almost certainly this is the person who's been doing some of those, not all of them, some of those murders we hear, and certainly doing some sabotage. So, is this a saboteur? Almost certainly. Is this who I think it is? I couldn't tell you for 100%, but that's who I think is the most likely candidate. In the chat talking about Discord, yeah, I've been a bit busy the last couple of weeks, so I've not managed to deal with that. But yes, it's on my list of things to do. I'm terrible at having a list and never getting around to them. But yes, thank you very much. I will be doing that. Okay, so there we got question from who was that? That was DickCrabb'sSquire, Maura Lee. I've got two more questions in from my patrons, so now is a good time to drop any more questions into the chat. I'll pick up as many of them as I can as I'm going through. Maura's saying Robb's will has Jon Snow as his heir because Robb thought all his siblings were dead. Fans know that his siblings are very much alive, and soon we will see them all eventually be reunited, except for Bran and Arya immediately, each having a backer to their claim to the Stark inheritance. Jon Snow would then lose his claim, but does this also make Jon Snow still a bastard? Is Jon Snow's legitimacy dependent on him being the Lord of Winterfell? Can Jon Snow remain legitimized even if Jon loses his claim to the Stark inheritance as Warden of the North? So this is another one of these kind of legal technicality things. If we're going down the legal technicality route, this really does depend on how that will is written. If the will says this is the last will and testament of Robb Stark, as of me writing this, I hereby legitimize Jon Snow, and he is now a full stop. Full stop. Next sentence. Also, now he is a full stock. I will name him my heir until I have children of my own. Full stop. At which point, those are two completely different clauses technically, and you could say, well, him being legitimized is not then undone by any of this, whether or not he's actually the heir. They are two separate issues. If, however, it says, because and only because my siblings are dead, I wish John to be the heir, and because and only because I wish him to be my heir, I'm going to legitimize him. Then you could certainly draw a case where you say, oh, well, maybe if it turns out that Bran and Rickon are dead, are not dead, they're alive, John isn't therefore the heir, therefore he shouldn't be legitimized. Instinctively, I feel that wording doesn't kind of hang together very well, and so the legitimization and the placing him as the heir are two separate causes. And I certainly don't know of any case of somebody being rebastardized after being legitimized to be, oh, actually, that was a mistake, we'll make you a bastard again. So I don't think that would happen. I think that John is now legitimized as a star, regardless of all this other stuff. That said, the constant refrain we've had through this stream talking about the will is that it actually, the technical issues that we've got going on here with, what wording is used here, what order is these different things said, that matters a whole lot less than what people decide on the ground afterwards. It won't be as neat and tidy as this, but it will be the equivalent of the will happens. John is legitimized and is named king. There's lots of battles that happen. Winterfell falls, and then we've got a few Starks around there, and then they'll sit around and go, so what are we going to do about all of this? Because clearly John wasn't supposed to be legitimized. Clearly John was only legitimized because we thought that Bran was dead. Bran's actually alive. Should we just let him carry on doing that? But we'll try and make Bran king. And then Bran says, well, I don't want to be king. John can do that. It's not going to be that simple, but it's going to be along those lines that they will just decide, and the will is just the starting point. It's just a way to push the action in a certain direction. Callie Summers, Jedi Spartan 42 saying, love Robert, finally made a live again. I do lives every week, actually, at the moment on this channel. I say this channel, you might be listening to this on a different channel, but on IDG Live, which is where I'm streaming through at this moment. Sometimes I pre-record my live streams, but I try and do every Thursday. There will be either me here live doing it, or there will be a pre-recorded live stream which I'm doing as a premiere, which means that the chat will still be here, so everyone can gather, and you can still hear me wittering away, and you can be having discussions in the chat. Callie Summers saying, hi Robert, hope you're doing well. I am, thank you. Under the assumption that the will does indeed clearly and unambiguously name John as his heir, how does that interact with John's vows? Since the Watch doesn't take sides in wars, are they actually subject to any of the potential rulers from Westeros? I.e., can Robb or any monarch truly dissolve a brother's oath or pardon them for desertion? I would have said no, but someone as rigid as Stannis made John a similar offer. If Robb really knew John, he might have considered the possibility that John would refuse. If Robb considered that outcome, he might have laid out a series of potential inheritors. He assumed Bran and Rickon were dead, and he couldn't trust Sansa's ability to act independently. But what about Arya? Who else could be on that list? Okay, so there's, a two-parter here, really. So first of all, sort of the clarification on do rulers have, well, three parts actually to this, really. Do rulers really have the right to free someone from the Night's Watch vows? If everyone agrees, yeah. That certainly seems to be the case. Nobody seems to dispute when Stannis is there saying, well, I'll do this if you promise me that. then John doesn't go, oh, I don't know if you've got the authority. He actively thinks about it. Um, is this a thing I want to do? So I think the answer is a king can. But it's not so say if you imagine Westeros generally speaking as no, everyone. I'm back. Could you just let me know in the chat if you can if you can hear me again? So apologies for that. Um, my service provider just decided to blink out, so apologies. I was in the middle of answering a question that I've now lost from Kelly Summers, so I do apologise. But Callie, I will try and answer your question next time. But I think I missed a couple of questions in the chat while I was there. Where E. Marty saying there's a line in the text. Kat says that she's trapped. Does that mean it's not John and instead someone else she wouldn't support? Maybe Kat herself. I'm not entirely sure when you're saying when the cat says that she's trapped. What does that mean? Does that mean it's not John and instead someone else she wouldn't support? I'm not entirely sure which bit you're referring to there. If this is in that conversation between John and sorry, not John, between Kat and Robb when they are discussing the will, then she's basically saying that she was going to be Robb has outplayed her. If you put it that way, in that she can't get her way because she knows that she can't persuade John. Right. Oh, actually, I think I can get to the end of Kelly Summers' question. I don't know exactly where I dropped out, but might Robb have had a list of people in his will that he thinks, oh well, maybe John will refuse after him. If John says no, then we go to such and such. Probably not, is my instinct, because he didn't really want those, and Cat couldn't even name who these other people were who perhaps could inherit afterwards. The idea that he might have like a little asterisk in there and say, well, if we find Arya, then yes, she can be included in it. That would be an intriguing little sort of side note, because he could say, I legitimize John. John is now my heir. If Arya is found again, then she is next in line after that. But I'm disinheriting Sansa. That would add a whole extra layer to this, and people don't trust Sansa kind of things, because if he deliberately, for all of this, we're talking about who is there. He's very clearly saying he doesn't want Sansa, and Cat agrees. Does he, in his will, specifically write Sansa out of the line of succession? In which case, there's even more reason for people to be sort of suspicious of her. A reflective rambling. Pick up a question for someone. It looks like a Greek name that I will not attempt to read, because I would completely get the name wrong. But the question is, from whose POV do you suspect we'll find out where the will is and who has it? I think the who has the will is actually less important than who are the witnesses to the will. And so who will find out and at what order is going to be one of the more intriguing things. So it's not like suddenly the whole world will know. It's pinned on the internet. It'll be the people at the wall will probably find out, and that we will probably, if I'm right, and this is a guess, I don't know this, but if I'm right that one of Galbert Glover and Mage Mormont have gone up to the wall to sort of inform John, hey, you're now king, that if they arrive during this gap while John is dead, then George R. Martin has left us one POV, which is Melisandre. So that's who we would see that through. Then it's a question of who the other people at Winterfell, like the greater populace at Winterfell, whose POV might we see that through? I mean, possibly Theon's, to be honest. I think George R. Martin quite enjoys writing Theon's, and he's certainly been there. The way he's used him recently, because he's taken, for obvious reasons, Theon has lost a lot of volition as a character. He is not driving action so much these days. I mean, he does escape, but certainly when we get the pre-release chat from the Winds of Winter, the Theon one, he's chained up the whole time. But through his eyes, we see a lot of what's going on with Stannis. And earlier, we see a lot of what's going on in Winterfell. And that seems to be the way that he's using him, is that we're seeing things that are going on that Theon is an observer to. So he would be a good person to sort of show this through, I think. Cyclops is better than Wolverine, saying who should be rewarded with the Dreadfort after the war? That's a good question. House Hornwood. Horrible things were done to them. Reflective rambling. Picking up a question, thank you, from Emily Hill. Only loosely related, but what do you think will happen to Robb in regard to the Stark crypts? That was a good question. So the question really is what's going to happen to Robb's bones, and then the question after that is, where are Robb's bones? And it seems pretty clear that the phrase would not be treating them with reverence. They're not sending them up to Winterfell to be carefully interred. What they did is a mockery for the deaths that we have. They threw Kat's body into the river as a mockery of her family's funeral rites. They attached Grey Wind's head to Robb's body as a mockery of the Starks with their direwolves. So it makes absolute sense to me that we're not told, but it makes absolute sense to me that those bones are gone, ground into dust or something. Okay, so I think with that, I'm probably going to slowly draw this one to a close. As I say, apologies for the slight break earlier. I'll try and take that out for those who watch this back a little bit later, so hopefully you won't miss too much. But this will be appearing, and all of the live streams here will be appearing on my new channel, which is In Deep Sleep. I mentioned this at the beginning. There's a link somewhere down in the description. The idea is that lots of people use these live streams to get to sleep. I've decided to lean into it. If that's what you want to do, that's fantastic. And they don't need me here talking to them with sort of the visuals. It's the audio that works. So I am uploading the audio with some different visuals, a crackling log fire, some rain against a window, that kind of thing, and have that as a sort of a backing track to it that will allow people to go to sleep. I'll make sure that channel never has any ads in the middle of it to sort of wake you up in the middle of the stream. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Go over there. I'm putting up one a week, slightly different each time for the first few weeks, just to see what works. Let me know in the comments of those videos what does seem to work for you and what doesn't, and we'll just try and reach something that works for the most people possible. E. Marty saying the Waynwood Knights, Roland and Wallace, in the pre-released Elaine chapter have horse faces. They're probably the distant Stark heirs. I've not even thought about that possibility. Yeah, so horse faces. I'd have to sort of read their descriptions and things. But being the Waynwoods, House Waynwood is obviously based in the Vale, which is where Cat thinks those distant heirs are. So yeah, I mean it's entirely possible. I'd have to reread that. That's an interesting spot. Thank you very much. A few people saying they prefer the rain sounds to the fire. I'll give a go with that next for the next one that I do. Okay, so over on the main channel, there will still be lots of videos coming out. I've got a few finishing up that kind of Varys kind of conspiracy going on there, just to sort of round that one off. If you're watching back this channel a little bit later than appearing somewhere around here, it's going to be a link to other live streams if you'd like to watch them. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so, and thank you if you do. While I'm saying thank you, moderators, you're amazing. Thank you for your excellent work today. As always, show some love to the moderators on your way out, everybody. Appearing somewhere in the middle here will be a link to In Deep Sleep, if that is something that is of interest to you. But take care, everyone. Have a good night, and I will see you again this time next week. Bye.